Good evening, and welcome to the Bellevue City Council meeting for Monday, December 10th, 2018, and welcome to everyone that is here in the room and took the time to come out this evening. The first item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, and we have Arrow of Light Scouts, Cub Scout Pack 483 here to help us with that. And normally at this point, after the Pledge of Allegiance, we have the invocation, but we don't have Father Dell here, so we will go right into the next item. So,
please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Scout Pack 483. And I still don't see Father Dell, so we'll move on to item number 3. Sabrina, please call roll.
Mr. Hanson.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Shannon.
Here.
Mr. Preister.
Here.
Mr. Burns.
Here.
Mr. Modry.
Here.
Thank you. Item number 4, this meeting will be conducted according to the Open Meetings Act, which is posted at the entry to the council chambers. Item 5, approval of the minutes from the November 26, 2018 meeting. Mr. Shannon.
Mayor, I move to approve the minutes of the November 26, 2018 Bellevue City Council meeting.
Second.
Second by Mr. Modry. Discussion or questions? See none, please roll call vote.
Mr. Hanson. Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Preister.
Yes.
Mr. Burns.
Yes.
Mr. Modry.
Yes.
All
Thank
voted
you.
yes.
Thank you. Before we go on to item number 6, to adjourn for sine die, I would like to ask those that are leaving the council if they'd like to say a few words. Mr. Hanson.
I would. Thank you very much, Mayor. I just want to say what?
Mike.
My name's not Mike.
I know that.
Oh, it's on. I'd like to say I've really enjoyed my last 4 years here. Learned a lot working with everybody, especially working with my compadres here. All of you guys have been just great. I also want to congratulate our new incoming Bob Stinson and Kathy Welch and our Rita, or I can't see him, Rusty way over there. I think somebody wants to get rid of this. I can't. Somebody mentions it every meeting so we can see people. But and also working with all the directors, all of you folks down here, Mr. Severson, the attorneys. Everything has been great learning experience, and I've really enjoyed it. And I can tell you that this is the shortest agenda I've ever had because we're going to be adjourning in a minute. I'll be out of here, so too bad for you guys. So, and also they left some chocolates, and I've been thinking about Christmas shopping, so I've got that done now. So thank you very much for all your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Hanson. Councilman Modry.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, ditto. I have really enjoyed the last 4 years as well, and it's been an honor to serve. All of you. I've tried to do my best in doing that, looking out for the welfare of the city as well as the citizens of the city. And I congratulate as well the new incoming members, Kathy Welch and Bob Stinson, and our new mayor, Rusty Hike. And I know they'll do a tremendous job for the city as well. And yeah, I've got my Christmas shopping done now too with the chocolates.
Yes.
Anyhow, thank you all. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman Modry. And then there's me. So I want to say this has been an absolutely amazing 8 years in my journey in life. And I want to thank each and every one of you from each of the directors, our attorney that sat by my side, our city administrator. We have our interim chief, Chief Guido as well. Thank you so much. Each and every one of you have been a great asset to the city of Bellevue. And I encourage others to step up and run for office. It's the most amazing experience that you'll never get at a desk in school. So it's great public service, and I appreciate every one of your support throughout the years. It's been interesting to navigate through some of this once in a while, but never did I not find someone that helped support or had the information for me. So thank you very much. And to the incoming Mayor, congratulations. And to the two council, Bob and Kathy, somewhere I know. Congratulations, and we're here if there's anything that you need. That takes me to item number 6, adjourn, sign a die. We need a motion, please. Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. It probably should be done by one of the two people leaving, but before they do it,
I make a motion, we adjourn right before you did, sorry. Go ahead.
want a second?
Second.
Discussion, Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank John Hanson and also to say a couple of words and also thank Jim Modry, because both of them have served in uniform, and I thank you for that service to our country. And both of them have also served here on the council for the last 4 years. Nobody knows the sacrifices that you have made other than your family. It has been a labor of love from both of you, I know, but you have served the people well. I send my thanks and Godspeed and best wishes to both of you. Thank you both very much.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Any other discussion or
I
comments?
also want to thank, he isn't here right now, but certainly we've had a city administrator for the last 2 years in Joe Mangiamelli, who is my neighbor and longtime friend I worked with in the city of Omaha 30 years ago, and it has been a great contribution that Joe has made. I feel very honored to have worked with him and appreciate the times that people didn't agree with him, that he could still be agreeable, he could work through issues, he could maintain his professionalism, and he could move the city forward in very positive ways. So Joe, my best wishes to you in the future. And not last or least, but Mayor Sanders, you have been a class act all the way. You have led the city in ways that have moved us forward from the military and the base, and working with all levels of government in Washington, the federal government, the county, the city, the state. You were behind the scenes making so many things happen. Very few people know or will ever know all of the contributions that you made or the things that you put aside in your own life to be able to be here and to do such an admirable job. We are fortunate that we had you. I am personally grateful and appreciative of all that you have done for the city. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Preister. Any further discussion or comments? See none. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hanson.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Preister.
Yes.
Mr. Burns.
Yes.
Mr. Modry.
One last time, yes.
All voted yes.
Very good.
Thank you. We will sign a die now. We'll excuse Mr. Hanson first.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hanson, if you want to go ahead and
Go ahead and
step
do
down.
what? Oh, sorry. I'm going out that
Followed
door.
by Mr. Modry, and then I'll step down. And we then will have, I believe, the judges here to swear in the new council and mayor. And but we'll excuse ourselves first.
All right. First of all, I'd like to shake the hands of our new mayor, if I could. Rusty and I have known each other for how long? And we're not the same age. That long. And, congratulations to. Oh, just. Why?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And Bob, right here, Bob, congratulations. Thank you. And I tried to help you with your computer, so if I leave it, it seems like there's no reset for you. I didn't touch it. All right, thank you.
He has Jim's computer, so you're fine.
I know, we're set. All right, bye-bye, guys. See ya.
Good luck.
Happy trails.
There you go. One more for me.
Oh, you got that?
Thank you, Bellevue.
I think I'll do Rusty first and the two of you after that together.
You want us to stand with him or sit down and let him do it on his own?
Usually what you do, Rusty, you bring up your wife and whoever else you want to, then you guys would come up into the second.
Okay.
If you'd
Okay,
like
we'll
that.
do that.
Ready to go then? Okay. Would you raise your right hand, please? I apologize, everyone, for the length of this oath of office. It's required by statute. I didn't write it. I, Rusty Hike,
I, Rusty Hike,
on this 10th day of December 2018,
on this 10th day of December 2018,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Nebraska
and the Constitution of the State of Nebraska
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely and without mental reservation
that I take this obligation freely and without mental reservation
or for the purpose of evasion,
or for the purpose of evasion,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and that I will faithfully and impartially
perform the duties of the office of Mayor of the City of Bellevue,
perform the duties of the office of Mayor of the City of Bellevue,
Sarpy County, Nebraska,
Sarpy County, Nebraska,
according to the law and to the best of my ability.
according to the law and the best of my ability.
And I do further swear that I do not advocate,
And I do further swear that I do not advocate,
nor am I a member of any political party
nor am I a member of any political party
or organization
or organization
that advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States
that advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States
or this state
or this state
by force or violence,
by force or violence,
and that during such time as I am in this position,
and that during such time that I am in this position,
I will not advocate
I will not advocate,
nor become a member of any political party
become a member of any political party
or organization
or organization
that advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States
that advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States
or this state
or this state
by force or violence.
by force or violence.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sign that.
say all that.
I know.
You're gonna have to slow it down. You have to slow it down. I'm from Bellevue. Slow it down.
All right. Ms. Welch, Mr. Stinson, are you ready? Okay, would you raise your right hands, please? I state your names.
I, Kathy Welch,
On this 10th day of December, 2018,
on this 10th day of December 2018,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Nebraska
and the Constitution of the State of Nebraska
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely and without mental reservation,
that I take this obligation freely and without obligation. Is that right?
without mental reservation,
Without mental reservation
or for the purpose of evasion,
or for the purpose of evasion,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and I will faithfully and impartially
perform the duties of the office
perform the duties of the office
of City Council Member
of City Council Member
of the City of Bellevue, Sarpy County, Nebraska,
of the City of Bellevue, Sarpy County, Nebraska,
according to the law and to the best of my ability.
according to the law and to the best of my ability.
And I do further swear
And I do further swear
that I do not advocate,
that I do not advocate,
nor am I a member
nor am I a member
of any political party or organization
of any political party or organization
that advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States
that advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States
or this state
or this state
by force or violence,
by force or violence,
and that during such time as I am in this position,
and that during such time that I am in this position,
I will not advocate
I will not advocate
nor become a member
nor become a member
of any political party or organization
of any political party or organization
that advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States
that advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States
or this state by force or violence.
of the state by force or violence.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's now a reception in the front foyer for about 15 minutes until about 6:30. So please go have cupcakes and punch and water, and we'll reconvene here about 6:30.
Good? Yep. Okay, call to order. Roll call, please, Sabrina.
Mr. Stinson.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Shannon.
Here.
Mr. Preister.
Here.
Mr. Burns.
Here.
Ms. Welch.
Here.
Okay, this meeting will be conducted in accordance with the Open Meetings Act of Nebraska. The copy of that act is located at the entry. We have approval of the agenda, consent agenda, claims, and advisory committee reports. 3A, approval of the agenda. Do I have approval? Motion by Pat Shannon,
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Second.
motion by Mr. Shannon, seconded by Mr. Burns. Please vote.
Find out. The vote is 5-1 with Mr. Cook voting no.
I need to redo
Did
that.
you mean to do that? Okay.
I was trying to help my friend to my right.
Rookie mistake.
I went like this and clicked.
I'll
off.
delete it and you can vote again.
You can change your vote.
I
Just
still
change your
voted.
vote.
I'll do a verbal vote in positive yes.
Okay.
It was a mistake.
Just trying to throw me off.
I went like this.
Give you your first test.
3A, approve, did the motion pass? Motion
Yes.
passed, okay.
Motion carries.
3B, sorry, approval of the consent agenda, those items marked with an asterisk. Number 1, approval of the claims. Number 2, approval of a temporary construction easement between the City of Bellevue and Sherwood Properties LLC located in Outlot A, Falcon Glen. B3, approval of a permanent sanitary sewer between the City of Bellevue and Sherwood Properties LLC located in Outlot A, Falcon Glen. B5, resolution number 2018-35, authorizing Mayor Hike and Treasurer Severson as banking signatories.
3B4, I think you missed.
There's no asterisk in front of it, is it included?
That's a good question. Is 3B4 supposed to be on the
Yeah,
consent
it is.
agenda? Okay.
It is.
Okay, so I'll add to the consent agenda 3B4, approving the request for release of funds for CDBG 2018 projects and authorizing submittal to HUD.
Just for the new council members, with respect to consent agenda items, if there's anything that you want removed, you just simply say, I want that removed, and we would otherwise approve the consent agenda, and that would be moved back onto the agenda for regular session.
Mr. Shannon?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Shannon, seconded by Mr. Burns. Please vote.
Preister.
Oh. Pointed to.
Yeah.
All voted yes.
Way to go, Paul.
Motion carries. Item number 4, organizational matters, election of the city council president for 2019. And I need a nomination from the council. Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor Hike, and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. I would like to make a motion to approve Paul Cook to be the next council president.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Preister, seconded by Mr. Burns for Paul Cook to be the council president. Any other nominations? Seeing none, please vote.
All voted yes.
Item 4B, approving the mayoral appointment of James L. Risto as city administrator. Mr. Shannon?
I would move to approve item 4B.
Second.
Moved by Shannon, seconded by Preister to approve. Open for discussion with the council members. Mr. Burns?
Thank you. I've had various meetings and conversations with most council members and the mayor regarding my concerns on this vote, approving a city administrator. Personally, I like Jim. I think he does a lot for Bellevue with energy and enthusiasm, which I greatly appreciate, as do so many others. But I cannot vote yes tonight because I do not think that we have gone through a fair and open process. I believe that there should have been an application process opening up the field, allowing others who are qualified and experienced a chance to apply for this position. I have no one else in mind, but I think history over recent years indicates how important it is for us to explore and find the best possible option for this critical leadership post. My colleagues may feel differently, and I respect that decision. I've struggled with this a lot, and I've come to the conclusion that this process is not as transparent and open as Bellevue deserves, and I'll be voting no. Thank you.
Let me comment. Yep. I think there was a much more extensive process than you may be aware of, okay? And I would ask Mayor Hike to comment on the number of applicants that he went through and the breadth and depth of the search that took place.
I'd be happy to do that. The administrator is the mayor's appointment. It needs to be confirmed by the city council. I started reaching out to several administrator types. I did interview a total of 6 with Jim. Those were all gentlemen. I don't want to mention their names just because there are several of them that do not want their names out in the public for discussion. That's the problem you have when you go to an open search. You miss a lot of candidates by those people not putting their names in because they don't want their boss to know that they're out looking. So when I look for somebody to in the private sector, I always try to headhunt them and find who I think is the best candidate for the position. I had 6 very good candidates that I did talk with, eliminated a couple of them fairly quickly. A couple of them eliminated us fairly quickly. And by far, Jim stood out as being probably the most, I don't know if qualified is the right word, but his background is not in city administration, but he has a vast background in personnel, contracts. He spent about 20 years with the World Herald. I've had the pleasure to work with him since 2012 in the Bellevue Chamber, and he has done a marvelous job there. This job, to me, we've had 3 what you'd call probably overqualified city administrators, the last 3 that we've had. And frankly, Bellevue's not moving in the direction that I would like it to move. And I need a people person. Jim is a people person. He's proved that. He's proved his loyalty to this town. He's has a lot of contacts throughout the city, very well liked. And Jim will move this city forward with me. It's a team. It's both of us and the entire team in Bellevue, all the employees. We need Jim to keep this ship moving in the right direction. So if you have any more questions, I would be glad to answer those.
One more comment.
Yep.
If you look at Jim's resume, he's supervised over 300 people, in his management career. He's dealt with contract negotiations before for the World Herald, and I can't think of anyone that loves Bellevue more than him, or is doing more on the economic development front, or has been more out there pitching Bellevue in a positive way than Jim. And I will resoundingly be supporting him and his nomination. I can't think of anyone that I'd rather see in that chair. I think that is an excellent pick.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we do have a motion and a second, so please vote.
The vote is 5-1 with Mr. Burns voting no.
Thank you for that.
I'll let him take his seat.
Jim, at this time, would you like to come sit up here and see how it looks from this direction?
Well, now that we've hired him, don't we need to employ him?
We'll work on that here. There might be some more questions on that.
Welcome aboard.
I think I look 10 pounds heavier on this side.
Put his seat down. Do I look taller?
Wow.
All right. Thank you. I'm totally confident that Jim will do this job and do it well. So I appreciate your confidence in that. Moving on to 4B1 would be approval of the employment agreement for Mr. Risto.
For you.
Pardon me? Yep, go ahead.
We did some cleanup items today on some things that maybe just didn't apply or otherwise didn't need to be in there. That is sitting on your desk. So if you guys are comfortable with the changes, what I would need is a motion to approve the employment agreement and then a motion to amend.
I will make the motion to approve the employment agreement as amended by the changes submitted by email and passed out today.
Approve it as written first, what was on the agenda.
Okay, do you want to do it as two?
Well, I want you to do a motion to approve and then a motion to amend.
Okay, we'll do a motion to approve first.
I'll second that.
Then I'll do a motion to amend based upon the changes that were passed out and emailed to us this afternoon.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
Do we have any discussion? Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. I have three areas. I'm a little concerned about this contract, and this, I believe, is a contract that we've had for two previous administrators. So I think some of the issues that we've had, or at least that I may have had, kind of got carried over. So it's no reflection of this one. But in Section 3, the termination, we essentially have 6 months that we would be providing a salary for any mayor who is terminated other than for just cause. After that, in Section A3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are all essentially justification for giving that much time to someone. They really read like a candidate applying for a city council position and justifying getting 6 months of salary. It seems to me this contract is the city contract, and it should not be making justification for essentially candidates. I am open to some other suggestions, but it seems to me that all of those things in A3 really are inappropriate to be in the contract. I think there are things that the council and we should be mindful of, and I could have 6, I think, if that may need to stay. But I just question, Mr. Sullivan, the need to have those items and those dollar amounts listed in a contract.
Sure. Let me go back to your first statement. On the 6 months, there's actually somewhat of a probationary period of 6 months. If you look in, let's see, I think it's the very end of that section. Let me find it.
There are two areas. One is the probationary period and one is the termination.
Right. In other words, there's a 6 month, in a sense, probationary period that if you were to terminate for any reason, those lump sum payments that we refer to in A3 are reduced equivalently into half. Secondly, the reason why these numbers are in here is, in a sense, to make it legal. Employment, you can't pay severance in a employment agreement in public entities, but you can negotiate to avoid certain lawsuits and otherwise. And generally speaking, these are typical in a contract for an executive level position. Your leader of your business, and I always tell people, the city of Bellevue is a $70 million corporation, and your city administrator runs that corporation. So those are typically that are in there, and what you'll find is if for some reason that you have performance levels that aren't adequate to what you want, but you can't put your finger on one little item. It's just kind of a totality of issues that you're able to then, under this type of contract, terminate it, and we're showing consideration as opposed to severance. And that's why that language is in there.
I'm not sure I was clear. I have no disagreement with what you said, and I recognize there's a distinction in here between a 6-month probationary period and a termination, and the termination could be before or after the 6 months. What I'm questioning is A3, where we specifically list the justification for a 6-month termination, and then we list dollar amounts of equivalencies of why we would justify that.
Again, that is because we have to show consideration. We have to show money being traded for some other good, if you will, and that good is the releases that we're getting. And this language is language that we've conducted both at the State School Board Association as well as the League of Municipalities to address languages for superintendents and city attorneys, county attorneys, and so forth.
Okay.
This covers what the Supreme Court, let's put it this way, this will fly legally, and that's why it's in there.
Okay, that's what I wanted to be sure of, and I thank you for that explanation then. The other thing, the next thing I would ask about is Section 7 on dues, membership, and professional development. Section A, the city agrees to budget and pay the professional dues and subscriptions of Ristow's continued and full membership in the Nebraska City Management Association, Nebraska Economic Development Association, and then it goes on to list other national, regional, state, and local associations and organizations. I don't really see any check or balance on the number or relationship. It doesn't have anything in there about the mayor overseeing that or a specific budget amount. I'm wondering about after NEDA, and if we put in may pay other national, regional, then it gives what would seem like some accountability. The mayor could decide, the council could decide, the budget could be a part of that. I'm looking for some narrowing or better description of how much or what might be available. And
Yeah, my only comment to that is certainly we could do that. The issue is there's somewhat of a level of trust that's going to be between the mayor and the city administrator.
right,
City administrator also does an employee evaluation, and if that's being abused, that can show up in his evaluation. That can also show up in the discretionary raise that the mayor can give.
okay, so you're saying the accountability is through the mayor and the mayor's oversight and doing his evaluation.
Correct.
Okay. And in Section B, would that oversight then, where it talks about the budget and travel pay and subsistence expenses, would that oversight be also the mayor and even further in the budget?
You'd have to ask Rich or Mr. Severson on that, but I would imagine the administration's budget is that itemized that it brings those items into play.
Mr. Severson's nodding his head yes. Okay.
And I think it's
Sabrina, are you able to put that up on the screen?
further restricted by necessary and desirable. I mean, those are the qualifications, I mean, at least of it.
Well, and I think the other issue is you've got some project that's going to happen in South Bellevue, and maybe there's several trips that need to be made. That's just going to, and then there's going to be years where you don't need to go anywhere, perhaps. So I think that needs to have some flexibility in it. And again, I think that comes back to the mayor's review, and also comes back to our budgetary concerns that if you see money being expended in there, you could reduce that budget.
Right. I appreciate the clarity because accountability is important. The last thing I will bring up is in Section 9, residency, and we have added or extraterritorial zoning. My concern with that, not so much where Mr. Istow lives, but are we being consistent? Is this the same for anyone else in a similar situation that we're hiring? Are they given the same option, or are we making an exception? And if it is an exception, and I'm okay with that, then I think we need to look at that in the future and make sure we're granting the same thing to everyone else.
As far as I know, I think the only time we've ever put that requirement on is on the city administrator. I don't think that's been a requirement of any of our chiefs or our directors. There's been some encouragement to do so.
Right.
But I think from the standpoint of our ETJ, we kind of consider as part of our city. And I didn't think that it was a huge leap from what we had done before. So.
And I would agree. I just couldn't recall any others, but I wanted to make sure we were being consistent.
It appears that language has changed a little bit. So I think Gary Troutman lived in West Omaha, so it must not have even been addressed in there.
Yeah.
So it appears it's been changing. So it's good discussion if we want to make that solid at some point.
I'll just try and pay attention. I doubt that it will come up again, but I raise the awareness and like the consistency.
Yep.
Those are all my questions.
Appreciate
Mayor.
those
Thank you.
questions. We've been through that contract 2 or 3 different times and cleaned it up, and there's a lot of things that came out and changed, so appreciate it. Any other questions?
Okay, so if I can clarify things again.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a motion on what was in your packet, and then there's a motion to amend, which is the red line I gave you today. So we're going to vote on the motion to amend. If that vote passes, then we're going to go back to the original motion as amended.
So we have the first and second, so this is a vote for the amendment, so please vote.
I saw it. It was all voted yes.
Okay, now we'll have a vote on the original motion to approve. Please vote.
All voted yes.
All right, thank you. So we move on to 5 special presentations. There are none. Liquor licenses, there are none. And just a quick thought, thanks for being patient with that. That's pretty transparent when you can negotiate a contract right here in public, so appreciate that.
Yes, it is.
Item number 7, ordinances for adoption, the 3rd reading. 7A is ordinance number 3916, rezoning tax lot 1, except right-of-way, section 7, township 13 north, range 13 east of the 6th PM, Sarpy County from AG to BN for the purpose of business office. Applicant is Matt Ricchini. Location 4803 Capehart Road.
And then you'll ask her to read the title.
And Sabrina, could you read the title?
An ordinance to amend the official zoning map of the city of Bellevue, Nebraska, as provided for by Article 3 of Ordinance Number 3619, by changing the zone classification of land located at or about 4803 Capehart Road, more particularly described in Section 1 of the ordinance, and to provide an effective date.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve? Mr. Shannon.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve ordinance 3916 as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion?
Yeah.
I just want to mention that if you want that just BN and no development agreement, then this can be voted on. If you want the development agreement as part of the rezoning, you would have to make a motion to amend with the amended motion that's in the packet.
And I think we're going for some discussion on this one. So,
Open for discussion. Mr. Preister.
I would move to amend with the amendment that has the additional section and reference.
I'd
As
ask
just
that we hold
described.
off making that motion, Don, if you don't mind, till we can kind of discuss this, because the intent of several of us here is to vote on just the ordinance.
That's fine, but I'm not going to personally vote on the ordinance as it is currently in this form. So I would like the discussion to be on the amendment. If there's no second, then we will discuss this and then we can do it.
Okay, we have a motion.
We had motions from last 2 weeks ago that we put on the table.
Let's go back and look at the minutes.
Yeah, you told us we could table it with the motions on the floor. Good memory.
We're checking for prior motions. Please give us a minute.
Oh, yes, they were. Good point. We already had,
We already have it with the
yes,
amendment.
we do.
We don't know who made them, but it's
We-
It
there.
won't matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we actually have a,
Right.
we're gonna have you withdraw your motion,
All right, I'll withdraw the motion.
and you're withdrawing a motion because they're already on the table. We have a motion to
Wasn't seconded.
we have a motion to approve the ordinance, and there is a motion to amend the ordinance to add the new section 3 that references the development agreement.
Yes.
So now we're on further discussion on the motion to amend.
Hang on, give me a second. Let me get papers.
Mayor.
Mr. Preister.
While people are gathering their thoughts, I'll just comment that this is an unusual situation. It's a somewhat unique parcel of land, and we have attempted to go against essentially our own zoning codes and to make an accommodation, which we try to do to help businesses. In this case, that accommodation, in my view, got a little complex. It got a little complicated. The nature of where the land sits. There is a development right next to it. Some things are already going in the area. Traffic is going to increase, as we heard last time. Some of that land is likely to be taken away and used for the widening of the road, for turn lanes. In the future, and probably not the very distant future, that area is going to look very different. In my estimation, to pass anything without paying attention to those changes that are coming and coming very quickly would not be very responsible. I think we need to know what's going to be done, have it outlined in writing so it's clear to everybody, and not just throw fate to the wind and expect that in the future something good will come of that. That's not responsible legislating. That's why I think this amendment is the most important way to go. It references a development agreement. The development agreement has the specificity of what can and can't be done. And if we need to, we can even amend that. But to simply pass an ordinance saying we've changed the zoning and not pay attention to all the consequences of that is not something I'm personally comfortable for and could not vote for. Thank you.
Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Sullivan, I'd like maybe you to address two issues. What would occur if this development agreement would go away? And what is the importance or the reason why we need a development agreement? And then I might have some questions after that.
Okay. First of all, I think part of the difficulty in this is it's a very small piece of ground. The area there wasn't ever zoned or in the future use maps, comprehensive plan looked to be used as a commercial property. Whether you agree with that doesn't matter. That's where it is. That piece got really tight, if you will, once that new development came in there. It doesn't have any real area to expand. That intersection is extremely busy, and it's probably at a fifth of what it will be when all the homes are built out there. And so the concern was, hey, we want to make this work, and I say, hey, it's the administration saying we want to make this work, but we're going to have to put some parameters on this so that we don't create a bottleneck, we don't create accidents and so forth. The biggest issue on there was looking at what is going to be low impact as far as traffic. An office building, particularly an insurance building, there is not a large traffic impact. But if there were stacking trying to get into the business or otherwise. So if you look at BN, we walked through BN business neighborhood and said what could and could not be done in there that would be, in a sense, low traffic and still allow it for commercial use. When we got to that, it essentially is what is in the development agreement, and that is office use. It's limited to 7,500 square feet. Without that, you could have flower shops, you could have convenience stores, the list goes on and on and on, and things that would have traffic coming in and out of it all the time. Daycare centers could go in there. There is probably 30 different permitted uses in there, a lot of which is pretty high traffic. And so the thought is we're really trying to put a square peg in a round hole from the standpoint of this property is just unique. It's difficult to make it work correctly. There may be some issues where the driveway is going to have to be moved further to the south. It's going to be a busy intersection. So looking out for the public safety as well as trying to let somebody have a viable use of their property, the development agreement seemed a way to resolve that problem.
Would it be appropriate as part of this discussion to ask Mr. McKinney to step forward or is it to make sure, because if we approve something, he may not like it.
He's the most affected, and I think you can certainly ask him what his opinion is on it, certainly.
Is Mr. McKinney here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's here.
Just waiting to be asked.
I'm Matt Burkini. Give my address on here, 2211 Cape Art Road, number 106, Bellevue.
And Matt, one of the things that I wanted, we talked this afternoon, and we talked about some of the issues in this development agreement, and I'm sure, I guess what I would like to know before we start voting on things, sort of where you fall on some of these. I don't want to go through this, and then you walk out of here and say I'm not going to move forward on the property. If there is if the development agreement that we have been presented, and I'm sure you've seen it, what are the main issues that you don't want to see in it? Or you can live with it and move forward?
Well, I know there was I'll say a first revision, a draft of the development agreement. And Patrick, I appreciate your time and effort to address some of the concerns that I had in that and came up with your red line version. And in looking through this, I think, and I'm certainly in agreement with limited use. If it's rezoned for BN with a restriction to less than 7,500 square feet, small business, I'm okay with that. That means I don't want to sell it to a flower shop or a nail salon or a daycare center. I'm okay with it staying that proposed use is. In looking through the development agreement, Section 1 clearly states the property may be used and developed only for general office use.
And you're in support of that?
And I'm okay with that. It also says, Section 8, this agreement shall run with the land and shall be binding upon the parties hereto and the successors and assigns, which I think maybe a little bit of just kind of repeating. It's going to be limited to use. Section 11 also says if the developer is in default of this agreement, in addition to any other remedies available to the city may revert the zoning back to the AG, and developer shall not object or oppose or appeal the city's action to do so. Section 11 kind of piggybacks on Section 1, and it piggybacks on Section 8. but it takes away my right to object. If something is done in error, I can't even say, excuse me, that's not the way code is. So I do have some philosophical problems with the default clause, because if it gets zoned for small business use and that gets passed, technically speaking, I don't think it could go back to AG.
Well, one of the things that we talked about briefly this afternoon was, and I don't know which copy you have, but
I
my
got one
copy-
and two.
My copy says that you would have 60 days to correct any default. So if it was a typographical error, if it was a simple error, that would allow you that time
Yeah.
to fix it.
Okay, because it's not on. And I certainly see the duty of the city council to protect the city of Bellevue from somebody like a small business owner goes in and sees a great opportunity, buys the land. All of a sudden, it's a hot item because there's lots of traffic at 48th and Cape Art Road, and I capitalize and turn around and double my money. It's not what I'm trying to do.
Sure.
I appreciate the fact that you're trying to protect the city of Bellevue. I'm not opposed to protecting the city of Bellevue. Thus, I'd be certainly willing to say Section 1 is certainly spot on. That's exactly the reason why we need to have a development agreement.
If
Section 8 goes along with it. But Section 11 basically ties my hands. And
Matt, if I could clarify something.
sure,
On Section 11, you
Yeah.
can fight the default to the Supreme Court. It's after the default has been determined, and it's no longer an appealable issue. If a default has been
okay, I didn't interpret it that
Okay.
way. And I literally did think to myself, I couldn't even take this to court to fight the city of Bellevue
No.
because it says I'm giving up my right to object or oppose or appeal. An appeal, I believe, would be the court process, and you would probably know better than me.
you'd be able to appeal if you didn't think you were in default. Okay, it's once that determination has been made, either by acquiescence, mutual consent, or court, and it has not been appealed.
Okay.
Then our remedy is that we can withdraw the zoning.
Okay. If we had Section 1 and Section 8 in it, is Section 11 required?
Section 11 is exactly what we do on special use permits. And when I say this is a square peg fitting in a round hole, your square peg's kind of like a special use permit.
I resemble that comment.
Would a simple statement for your benefit, and I'd have to have Pat maybe help me, but
Sure.
would a statement on 11 simply a short sentence saying, the developer has a right to appeal a decision made by the city to the courts?
I think Section 11 would be great if it says, that if notified, I have 60 days to remedy. And, I think the language at the end of it, that the developer shall not object, oppose, or appeal the city's action to do so, is what I would like to say, if that doesn't have to be in Section 11, I'd be all for having a default clause that says, hey, if the city sees Matt's in default, the city's going to notify him and he's got 60 days to make it right. As I understand city ordinance, and I'm not claiming to be a specialist in it, but if I'm notified that I'm not in the compliance with the city ordinance, then
So
the zoning department, the planning department's going to come to me and go, you have to stop operating your business, which is the last thing I want to do. I'm buying this to run my business.
Okay, so you're saying after the resorting back, you're saying release it, or shall not object, oppose, appeal, to remove that?
That would be my preference.
You're basically looking for a period after the AG, correct?
Yes. Let me see it. Hold on.
No, actually, after the word default.
Section 11. Developers in default of this agreement and rest remain
That
60
is-
days after registration is written in such default. Period.
I don't think there'd be any issue of putting something in there that you absolutely have the right to go to court if you're not happy with our action. But once a court says this, then we don't keep fighting. Is that sort of what we're trying to do here, Pat?
Yeah, I think what he's trying to say is he's concerned that oppose or appeal the city's action to do so is even our statement that he's in default. So if you guys are comfortable, I don't have a problem with that. After the initials AG, we put a period there.
And then, are you following what?
Yep.
Okay, and then another thing we talked about was the sidewalk, the trail.
Okay.
And I don't want to say I took it as you had no problem putting the sidewalk in, but the issue was I have to have the sidewalk in before I can receive my certificate of occupancy. And we thought, and we had discussion at the last meeting, could we maybe put something in there that there can be a time frame that you can bid out the sidewalk with the developer to the south and do it at the same time to try to get a better price?
I would certainly hope to be able to coordinate with somebody who's going to be laying yards and yards and yards and yards of concrete and just say, how about you throw 2 more yards my direction?
Right. So
if they've got that ball rolling, it would make a whole lot more sense to have them continue.
So if by asking Mr. Sullivan if we can word it, in other words, what you're saying is, in a month from now, I might want to open my doors, but I don't have my sidewalk in. I want my certificate of occupancy with the knowledge that the city will allow me to give me another 3-4 months, or when the developer to the south puts his sidewalk in.
Yeah.
And then we'll extend mine, and I hope I can get a better bid on a price of getting the sidewalk done.
Yes. In looking at the first draft and the red line version, and then having a conversation with a few different city council members, it's been brought to my attention there is not an agreement. There's not clarity on this. So, I don't have a problem. I said I'd be a good neighbor, and I have every intention of being a good neighbor, no pun intended, around the State Farm jingle. But
There's a good plug.
yeah. Did you get that on TV, y'all? Yeah. Okay. I don't have a problem with putting in a bike path. I think some of my reservation is if I put somewhere between $20,000 to $35,000 into a bike path, and then the city or the county comes in and says, we're going to widen that road, we need a turn lane.
Well,
did I just waste a bunch of money?
Mr. Roberts, what occurs in those situations where the county or the state or the city would make improvements, and we would maybe need more land, and we would tear up someone's sidewalk?
Well, in the case if we were doing the road construction, we'd put it all in, including the recreation trail, sidewalk, whatever goes in
So
there.
if the city tore it up, we would replace it. It may move because we need more right-of-way.
Correct.
But as we made improvements to the road, the sidewalk would be replaced
But
also
but
on
as
the
a-
city's cost.
Correct. As a roadway project, we would bear all the cost of it.
Okay.
So I guess what I'm asking you, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I'd like to get this resolved for you.
Okay.
So that when you walk out tonight, you know where you're gonna head. And if there was more amendments made pertaining to the sidewalk being completed, and tell me if we can't do it, if I'm saying something wrong, Chris or Mr. Sullivan, but delay it until the developer to the south puts his sidewalk in. If we would eliminate after agricultural AG put the dot and the rest of that sentence, is there anything else could you live with this, or is there anything else that you think would need to be changed?
Matt, you might want to address the 17-foot. On the redraft, I have the dedication of the 17-foot.
Okay, the idea of the 17-foot was, to my expectation, in lieu of me taking and assuming the responsibility and the payment and the maintenance and the liability of an 8-foot bike trail. If I'm going to take that on, then I'm not willing to donate 17 feet of 3,200 square feet of the land that I'm trying to buy.
I think that was some of the sentiment of the council members that I had talked to as well.
We've had several meetings with the council members, and that's the way it was discussed, was by you dedicating the 17 feet, that we thought the city or whoever's responsible for that development at the time would pick up the cost of the trail.
Either or.
That's what was agreed to in the first meeting, but it changed in the second meeting.
It, from phone calls I've received, I think things have changed, or at least there's been discussion on it. And I guess what I'm trying to get to here is that the city, if there's additional right-of-way there, and the typical way to obtain that right-of-way, I think the city, if we have to have the right-of-way, we negotiate in good faith with Mr. Ricchini and the city buys it. What I'm sort of getting hung up on is we don't put sidewalks in for people. And I don't want to start a precedence here. I mean, if Mr. Ricchini was in a different zone, that the proper zone for what he's trying to do, and he gave us a plan, he'd put in the sidewalk and everything. And if the city would come in there and say, we need more right-of-way, we'd have to buy that from him. So we need to obtain this right-of-way. Is that correct, Jeff? And would we then negotiate to try to purchase it from Mr. Ricchini?
Well, there's a couple ways you can do it. But yes, we would need the 17-foot to line up with the development, because all that was dedicated back to 17-foot. And that was in preparation of putting an 8-foot recreational trail in it. So the two methods you have is the property owner can donate the land back to the city in lieu of something else, and in this case would be the concrete, or then we just go through the whole right-of-way process of purchasing it, pay fair market value, and then it would be up to the property owner then to put the concrete in. So those are the couple options that you have.
And Mayor, the only reason, after my meeting and some phone calls, I had the feeling that people were sort of concerned about the city building the side and paying for the sidewalk when we normally would not do that. What we would normally do is we'd buy the right-of-way and let the property owner put a sidewalk in it, like what happens in front of my house, what happens in front of Mr. Shannon's business. I mean, he maintains it, he takes care of it, and that way we're not making the exception for Mr. Ricchini.
I follow what you're saying, but we can take care of the right-of-way issue right now, so we're not negotiating later, and maybe that price goes up 2 years from now, and we pay a lot more for the right-of-way. So I think I would be in favor of taking care of that issue, letting him dedicate the right-of-way, and us taking future responsibility for the pavement.
And one thing you guys have the ability to do is you can grant a sidewalk waiver so that he can open up his business prior to that sidewalk being put in, or trail, whatever is going in that area. He would have to petition Public Works. Based on the criteria, I'd have to deny it. Then he'd have to bring it to you guys to overrule that waiver.
But I understand what you're saying, Mr. Cook. What's fair about it? And I guess the problem is we created this problem by leaving that small corner on the corner and letting the developer develop around it. So it's I think there's a little bit of responsibility for us putting that property in this situation in the first place. So
I also understand that there's another issue with planning, saying that we have to replat this. That was something that came out this afternoon?
No, we do not require
Kathy?
a replat.
Oh, that was a recommendation. Mr. Sullivan and I talked earlier today, and he said one of the things that we could do is have planning replat this. And I think I sent you a question on that to see what would be the steps of that. And if it's replatted, because it's considered a tax lot, and if it's changed to the BN requirement, then that would take care of the sidewalk situation. Is that right?
We do not require a platted lot for building. He can build on a tax lot. So we do not have that requirement.
But what would and I understand him building on the tax lot. My question is, if it's changed, if it's replatted, then it becomes his responsibility for the sidewalk.
Not necessarily. The sidewalk requirement in the city code deals with additional square footage on the building that's there. So if he's not adding square footage to the building, the city code requirement for adding a sidewalk doesn't kick in.
Did I understand that right, Mr. Sullivan, that we talked about earlier today?
Most cities, when you change the zoning on a tax lot, will make you plat it as well.
Okay.
We do not have that requirement.
I'm probably negotiating against my client, but one of the issues in regard to the proposal of dedicating the 17 feet and then we build that at some time, I guarantee you that intersection is going to be transformed in the next 10 years, maybe in the next 5 years. And all I know is wherever we put that 8-foot trail on that corner is going to be in the wrong place when it's time to expand that corner. So we're going to probably end up tearing it out anyway. So it supports the idea of doing the 17-foot, and we'll deal with it when that intersection gets expanded.
I always look at the highest and best use of a property, and it's hard to pick what that is on this corner, and I think Matt has it. That's the best we're going to be able to do at this corner, and I think we need to figure out how to make it work.
Are there limitations on expanding to the east? I mean, I noticed all the capturing of land has been on the west side. I mean, the east side's not even been developed yet.
Could you move the
East
center?
side what?
Up 48th Street.
He's talking about moving the center of the right of way.
Oh, I suppose you could, but
I think on the east side of the road, the right of way has been dedicated to 50 feet from center line as well. I'm pretty sure Mr. Ricchini's piece is the only piece in that area that doesn't have the full 100-foot right of way.
And we would not want to have a jog in the road or anything, so.
Right.
I
Well,
think the geometry of that has already been set up, so.
in order to jog it, you'd end up, and if you wanted to keep the 100 feet of right of way, you'd end up taking it out of the lot that Del Lago is already platted for apartments. It's got the extra 70 feet's got to come from somewhere.
Right. Is there any other discussion? What's the motion?
Well, right now, we're still just on the ordinance and amending the ordinance to bring in section 3 of the development agreement. If we get past that portion, then we would move on to the development agreement. And then I'm not sure I'm where you're at, Mr. Ricchini, on dedicating the 17 feet and pulling out the part about having to put in the trail.
Yeah. Well, from what I've read in the red line draft, I certainly think that would be fine. I would only ask that if I'm going to give the 17 feet, that it be designated exclusively for the bike trail. I've heard from Paul, and Paul's got a legitimate point. He doesn't want to pay for somebody's sidewalk. But I am certainly willing to work on handling one thing or the other. Honestly, I'd rather not pay for a sidewalk or a bike trail and then have the county come in and go, we're redoing this intersection. And then I can sit there and cry over my wasted cement and retaining wall.
But
I'm
again,
more in favor.
but again, sorry to interrupt, Mr. Roberts, didn't you say that if the county came in and changed whatever, then they would take care of redoing the sidewalk and the retaining wall, typically? I mean, I know you can't speak for the county, but what is?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's their jurisdiction right now, so any road work is going to be taken on by Sarpy County until it's a time we annex and then Bellevue would take it.
So if Mr. Ricchini puts in the retaining wall and the sidewalk, and the county comes in and goes, we're going to make this bigger because we got too much traffic and whatever, wouldn't they take care of the work that he has done and redo it?
If they do a project, yeah, they do the same thing. If they had to take it out, they'd put whatever they had to back in. And I get his point is kind of, you don't want to do it twice.
Right.
I don't want to do it twice, and I wouldn't want to see the city or the county do it twice. I'm willing to make the donation once I buy the land of the 17 feet to the city, so the city can do with it as they see fit, but,
I just have a concern with, along with Mr. Cook, that, you know, we don't want to start setting the precedent that we're going to start putting in sidewalks. And I'm wondering if by the way that this is written and the way we're doing this, are we starting to set that precedent? And somebody else says, well, you did it for that guy on 40th and Capar, why can't you do it for us?
I think most of the time in these development agreements, it's donated land in lieu of getting something in return.
And there's a big difference between a sidewalk requirement on a homeowner, which he is in this case, and an 8-foot trail. I mean, the cost is significantly different.
Well, and please understand, Mr. Ricchini, we're not, as you and I have talked, we're not trying to be difficult on this. This is just an unusual situation that we're trying to get through to make it, you know, part of the reason that this development agreement being here is that if you ever decide to sell, move on, pass away or whatever, this is filed so anybody else that moves into that understands what the requirements are to be able to move into your location.
Correct.
And this is just, for lack of a better word, it's just new territory that we're moving through to create this.
And it would certainly limit my ability to resell this land. And I'm not looking to buy it to resell it. I'm looking to buy it to operate my business out.
And nobody ever does, but you always have to plan for that backup plan at some point, you know.
Right. So
if I understand, you're okay with how it's written with the new red line, except for on 11, we want to remove all the words after G, AG. Correct?
Section 4 was good, Section 5 was good, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 11. I think if you make that change to 11, I am okay with the way it was redlined.
Okay. And then on section 2, where I have the dedication, the only thing I would add is the city, county, and public right-of-way. So.
I have one more question on 11 then. In here, it says, in addition to any other remedies available to the city may revert the zoning back to agricultural AG, and we're keeping that. Is that a new right, or does the city have that right somewhere else?
That's the right, like I said, this square peg is sort of like a special use permit, and that's what our provisions of our special use zoning says.
Yeah.
That we can,
But you're asking a man to buy a property, improve it, spend, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then we're gonna take his zoning away and make him stop his business immediately, and I don't know, the threat to the value of the property.
I would propose that we have that expire after 10 years. So if I develop it and I'm still there in 10 years, that the reverting back to AG is no longer a part of the default agreement.
I would, if I can add, Mr. Sullivan, I think that having it possibly, if we can, have it expire in 10 years, but if he sells it, it restarts itself.
that'd be pretty hard to manage from the standpoint of that. And Mr. Ricchini, the likelihood of us ever looking at this agreement again after it gets signed, and particularly under clause 11, is only if something ridiculous is done on the property. I mean, literally, outside of that, you should be fine.
Which there's protections in place.
Right.
It's got 60 days.
Yep.
Cure it.
I mean, do we want to add another 30 days or something and give it plenty
How
of
about we
room?
make it 120?
You know, our
Because
zoning,
if something were to happen, let's say this time of year, if I had to pour concrete, I'd be up to my my armpits in alligators, because pouring concrete in this kind of weather is not seen as a good thing to do.
we usually go a year around here before we get on anybody for zoning, so I don't know that 120 days is going to make a big difference.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. So let's go back to the ordinance and see if we can vote on the ordinance to be amended to add a reference to the development agreement.
Thanks, guys.
So clarify for me what,
So we're on the ordinance. There's been a
Right.
motion to approve the ordinance. There's been a motion to amend the ordinance to add the new section 3 that references the development agreement
Okay, and now we're going with what was done back 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
Okay, because that motion was made by Mr. Cook, seconded by Mr. Preister, to amend the ordinance as presented by Mr. Sullivan, section 3 added.
Correct.
Okay.
That's what
Now,
we're voting on.
now the very original motion to approve as originally presented was made by Mr. Shannon and then seconded by Mr. Modry. So I don't know how you're gonna do that since Mr. Modry is
It's
done.
already on the floor, though. We're
Okay.
fine.
So, are we gonna
We're
vote on
just
the amendment
Vote on the amendment.
of which includes?
Section 3 that adds the development agreement as part of the ordinance.
It makes reference to the development agreement that then would have the specificity that we've been talking
Then we're
and
gonna,
asking.
then we'll make another motion on more specific.
Right.
Correct.
And, okay.
So we can vote. Anybody else discussion? Everybody understand that?
Yes.
Please vote.
All voted yes.
Then, Mr. Sullivan,
Now you've got to vote on the original motion as amended. To, in other words, pass the ordinance with the amendment.
Yes.
So it's just another vote.
what did we change on? So we put the 120 days and the 18?
No, we're not to that yet.
Okay.
Now you're just voting on the ordinance as it has now been amended to add section 3.
And that's on the floor.
Correct. So go ahead and vote.
Discussion, please vote.
Went away too quick. It vanished on us.
Did it vanish?
All voted yes.
Okay, now we're on the
All right.
development agreement.
So we are on 7A1, approval of the development agreement.
I'll make a motion to approve the development agreement as amended here tonight.
Do it as the development agreement as originally presented, and then we'll amend.
Okay? Move to approve the development agreement as presented here tonight.
Second.
I'll move to amend the development agreement as discussed here tonight.
Second.
And to clarify that, that's the red line that was provided to you in section 2. We'd add the county, and in section 11, we'd change it from 60 days to 120 days.
And shorten
And
it.
we would shorten that sentence to end at agriculture AG.
So I have a question. So help me to clarify. Does this mean Mr. Ricchini is giving us the 17 feet and we're putting the sidewalk in under this development agreement?
Essentially, that's what it gets to, yes.
Okay.
At some point.
I got a question. If we put in that sidewalk, Mr. Roberts, who maintains it? Who's gonna go out there and push the snow and fix it if it, cracks?
If it's a recreation trail, then that would be the responsibility of either Sarpy County, City of Bellevue. If it's just a normal sidewalk, then it would be the property owner's responsibility. But us as a municipality would take care of it if it's a trail.
But so what you're saying, this is part of an 8-foot trail that extends to the south, and once the sidewalk's put in, if it snows, the NRD will plow it. If it breaks up, cracks up, they'll come and repair it, because it's a trail.
Not the NRD.
Or who'd you say
I said
City or
it'd
county.
be
City or
city or county,
Okay.
whoever has jurisdiction at that time.
Okay.
Voting on the amendment.
Vote on the amendment.
Voting on the amendment, that was, motion was made by Shannon, seconded by Preister, so any discussion? Please vote.
Do we have anything in there delaying the sidewalk?
All voted
You'd have
yes.
to put it anyway.
Okay.
All voted yes, so now we are,
On the agreement as amended.
so now we're on the original development agreement as amended. And that was a motion by Shannon and seconded by Preister as well. And question, Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. Not so much a question, but a comment on the process. And I want to thank Councilman Cook because he raised good questions to lead to Mr. Ricchini and getting an agreement. Government and coming together with policy sometimes can be messy. And often we do it outside of the chamber, so when we get here, everything is ready. But through the best of our efforts, sometimes that doesn't work. But I appreciate your persistence. I appreciate Councilman Cook's persistence, and this entire body worked diligently to come to some agreement. And my concern was that we had something resolved tonight. We're there, and I feel good about it, and I salute everybody for working through the process. Thank you.
Agreed. Any other discussion? Please vote.
All voted yes.
All right, thank you, Matt. Motion passes.
That was easy.
How many weeks has that been?
Hey, it only took till 8 o'clock this time.
I think this would have been 3 readings, the third reading.
Third.
This is really our fourth reading.
Oh, is it? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, we laid it over one.
All right, 7B, ordinance number 3919, rezoning lots 1 and 3, College Plaza Addition replat 1, and lot 5, College Plaza Addition, from BN-PCO and BNH-PCO to BG-PCO for the purpose of commercial development. Applicant Sharves Contracting, general location. 1020 Lincoln Road.
That's gonna read the ordinance.
Please read the ordinance.
Ordinance number 3919. An ordinance to amend the official zoning map of the city of Bellevue, Nebraska, as provided for by Article 3 of Ordinance number 3619 by changing the zone classification of land located at or about 1020 Lincoln Road, more particularly described in Section 1 of the ordinance, and to provide an effective date.
This is a third reading, so Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make a motion we approve ordinance number 3919.
Second.
Motion by Cook, seconded by Preister. Any discussion? Mr. Shannon.
This is the B&B hot dog? Okay. There have been concerns raised over water runoff from this property, and we have yet to see a plat of what's going to go in here. And so this is a public safety concern where we've already had 2 deaths from, the water runoff problems that already exist from normal rainfalls. So I think this is a project where we need to be very careful about what we do and make sure that we have the proper engineering to show us, if we add a parking lot, how much water runoff is going to be there, what are the water retention requirements, and I don't think any of that has been presented to us at this point to start doing this. I do believe that part of this project is an existing building where we're just looking at changing the zoning of an existing building, and I think that part's fine. But when we start getting into the additional pieces and changing zoning of other pieces where we don't know what is going to be there for parking, what's going to be there for roof space, we have no engineering report that says what the water retention requirements need to be to keep this from contributing to an already existing problem that the city hasn't addressed yet. I think there's a lot to ask about on this.
Mr. Mayor? Yep. Bob, can you talk about the fatalities that happened and give a little bit of background with regards to this?
Well, what happened, once that intersection flooded, it was actually behind the Westlake Hardware area. The vehicles that were in question, they actually drove into the flooded water and was carried away to the ravine by the flowing water. So that was, I don't want to say it's a mental error on the person that did it, but you never drive into flooded water like that in the first place. They've come to make corrections on that. They've put some poles up around that ravine there on Fairfax to try to keep cars from ending up into that. I think it's happened twice. The last one, I believe, was the problem. He actually got out of his car trying to get to higher ground and slipped off of his car, and that's what carried him away into that. But that intersection is flooded for years. I mean, it's been that way just generally when we get the heavy rains. I don't know the distance from where B&B Dog is that it's going to filter that much water clear down to Westlake Hardware where this occurred. So I can't see where anything at B&B Dog is going to affect where this incident actually occurred.
Would I be correct in saying this is rezoning and all that comes to planning later? So they would have to.
You'd be very correct.
Applicants here, do you want to add something?
Yeah, this is just a rezoning application. Once we determine if the batting cage is going to happen, then we have to go through the planning commission again, meet with the city planning department, and determine what the project can entail or not. This is not this. If the batting cage doesn't get approved, or y'all know my current situation, if we determine that the bank, it's not going to be an option, it's just offering more opportunity for more zoning for that property. So this isn't saying the batting cage is going in and that you guys are approving that tonight at all. It's just saying that this land will have more opportunity if the zoning is approved.
Could you please state your name and address,
I'm so sorry.
please?
Diane with Sharves Contracting and B&B Classic Hot Dogs.
Thank you.
Currently, we have a dog training facility that is ready to open as soon as the approval is given for the rezoning and the occupancy from the permits department. And then we're in the process of working with our architect and the bank and trying to get the batting cage project going. With my current situation as far as the passing of my partner, we're not sure if we're going to move forward, but that's not what's on the table tonight.
Any other questions, comments? Again, we have a motion by Cook and seconded by Preister to approve ordinance number 3919. Please vote.
All voted yes.
Diane, we're happy to see you moving forward on this.
Thank you. Item number 8, ordinances for public hearing. This is the second reading. 8A, ordinance number 3921, amending Article 7 of Chapter 28 of the Bellevue Municipal Code regarding the City of Bellevue Complete Streets Policy. Brought by Planning Director. So I will open meeting for public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak for or against?
Good evening, Chuck Frederick, 1511 Madison Street. And I could be way off base, but my understanding of complete streets is not a good thing. What I've seen, what I've heard, I guess, and I could be wrong about this, but first step is a complete street. They put the bicycle trail in along with the street. Then the next step, they eliminate the parking, and the next step is they eliminate the cars. They want public transportation. I think it's a program that it really should be looked into really carefully, because my understanding is complete streets is not what we in America want. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Mr. Modry.
Yes.
You just
Jim
can't,
Modry.
You just can't get away from us.
I know it. 1207 Rebecca Court here in Bellevue.
All right, yeah, I haven't had enough. Kind of glad I wasn't in that earlier discussion, though. That was but you reached a settlement. That's great. Okay, on the proposed changes to the Complete Streets Ordinance. First, I want to. I kind of am the result of, I guess, initiated this, and it's kind of taken place because of what I brought up initially. But I want to thank the Planning Department, the Planning Commission, the Citizens Complete Streets Advisory Panel for the work they put into this and into making some of these changes. I'm grateful that they did acknowledge motor vehicles within the ordinance. That's the main purpose of a street to begin with, and the mention of motor vehicles was not in the ordinance, so that's good. In section 28-151, they added in that they would also accommodate motor vehicles. Very good. Other changes that were made, they added provisions in there for city council approval, which is proper and correct. Wording where they had the planning or public works director to issue exceptions was changed, and those were appropriate changes.
Thank you.
The planning or public works director do not issue those changes. They provide recommendations for the council to approve, and so those changes were made. Under 28-153B, I was glad to see them add an accommodation if the efficient flow of current or projected motor vehicle traffic flow was impacted. And really with any complete streets improvement or project that is undertaken, there is going to be an impact to motor vehicle traffic flow. And generally it's a negative impact. Recognizing that, they put in the words substantially detrimental to the efficient flow of current or projected motor vehicle traffic flow. I'm not sure if that's the correct term or not, substantially detrimental, but that's what the Planning Commission kind of came up with that night. And, you know, so that could be discussed, whether substantially detrimental is good or not. And they added another exception. It's number D, where the application of complete streets on one street would have a substantial detrimental impact on traffic volume and or safety on a neighboring street. That's an issue that has been seen on several complete streets projects in other cities, where it's a main thoroughfare and they've done complete streets work, and it has slowed up traffic, it's backed up traffic, motor vehicle traffic, so they kind of take a little detour off into the neighborhood, go down the neighborhood streets, resulting in a large volume of traffic increase through the neighborhoods where kids are, and, you know, school buses and what have you. So that's a good addition. Again, detrimental impact is kind of tough to tell. An example here, you know, on Fort Crook Road, the bike lanes, which I'm not a fan of, but those were put in, and it was not under a complete streets ordinance or that at the time, but still that was done. And one can say it did impact traffic flow, but the degree of that, you know, doesn't matter a whole lot, right? Traffic can still flow fairly well. So we didn't, I think it's good that they didn't say any detrimental effect, because there will most likely be some detrimental effect, but what's substantial, what's not, that's kind of a question. One item I'd like to see perhaps addressed is in the performance measurement area, and I didn't bring this up at the Planning Commission meeting, but it'd be nice to have some measures to show the impact on throughput or flow of motor vehicle traffic. The measures here they talk about are bike lanes created, linear feet of pedestrian accommodation, increase in public transportation use, walking miles, and then they talk about the increased efficiency of traffic flow. It'd be nice to also measure if there's a detrimental effect on traffic flow and provide that information back as well. So that's one thing I'd like to see added when this comes back up in January. In general, I would like to take a different approach, but that's probably not going to happen. I'd like to have the city just plan on the streets for motor vehicle use and justify adding complete streets things for accommodating bikes and approve the added expenditure rather than approve an exception to not spend that additional money.
Sure.
But we've been through that last time. So I think I would be in favor of this with the added provisions for performance measurements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Modrick.
Leland Jacobson, 4609 Lake Forest Drive, currently serving as chair of the Bellevue Planning Commission. And in this case, the focus of Complete Streets I will admit that I have one small conflict of interest with this, is that I'm a walker, but I don't own a bicycle. So somehow you're going to have to weigh that. When we last met in August on this topic, various groups, the Bellevue Planning Commission, staff, Planning Department, Complete Streets Commission, were all tasked with taking a look at the comments we had. Those about which comes first, the car or the road, who used the road first, walkers with the Romans, chariots, and probably more importantly, who's going to use the road tomorrow? And if you've seen any news on the West Coast, or if you've seen any news on the East Coast, electric bicycles, electric scooters, and walkers are happening more and more and more. So we're in the middle, literally. There's good points. We need a design basis to move forward. The engineers need a design basis to determine road width, right of way. People need a planning type of function to move forward with. There are currently, and I'm struggling with the computer, or I would throw this up on the screen if I could. But we have on task close to 900 cities in the United States that have adopted a Complete Streets program. And it might be okay to take a design basis and add complete streets, except it's the 90s, or it's almost 2020. And what we see happening is the customers that we all serve that come to Bellevue come here via Google and via Alexa, and they do a search. And Gen X, Gen Y, and even baby boomers, and the youngest of them all, I think they're called centennials now, all use the internet to get here. And what they want to look for is a livable city. And those people are moving to the suburbs, which is Bellevue, and they're looking for livable cities. And those cities are livable if they have a trail. Those cities are livable if they have a sidewalk. Complete Streets is your trademark to let you know that you're aligned with 900 other cities in the United States. Is it about taking away cars in 20, 30 years? I don't know. Time will tell. But the real point for Bellevue is Complete Streets is contextual. It's about what's good for Bellevue and sidewalks and walkers and bikers. The definition in Complete Streets has changed slightly. Streets are not just for cars. They're for moving people. So they're moving bicycles, they're moving walkers, and yes, Mr. Moulder and I agree on this, they're also about moving cars, and not necessarily to the detriment of cars. particularly in Bellevue. The Complete Streets organization that you have in front of you, the statute that we revised with all this help, says just that. So let me jump back into my second presentation. This is what you asked us about. And there's a couple other points I want to jump to before I get to the conclusion of this is, we're avoiding creating barriers between East and West Bellevue. Right now you have Fort Crook. If you're a walker or a biker, it's tough to get across. Kennedy Freeway, tough to get across. The Offutt approach path has been a barrier to Bellevue's development for 30 years, but the plus is we have Offutt Air Force Base. So to get across those barriers, we have to work with it, and Complete Streets is the solution to that. Complete Streets is your solution to tie the housing that's going in Southwest Bellevue along 36th Street, along with East Bellevue, to avoid fracturing the community. That's how this works. So we're being competitive with Complete Streets. We continue to use what works for Bellevue. It's an application of Complete Streets, and it's about all ages. So what I've got on the screen is a very busy set of pictures. These are all local pictures, except for one of them. But local Complete Streets, the top left is 36th Street. We've got 96th Street, Rayner Park down in the Twin Creek area. One's of the area by the Bellevue Library to the right. And I'm not sure if it'll show up very well, depending on how we can do this with this screen. Complete Streets is definitional, and I think I'll show this one. That center picture with the umbrellas, that's a complete street. There's cars in that empty area. Just didn't happen to be any passing by when I took the picture. And there's a lot of people right next to a park. That's what a complete street can look like in East Bellevue. It doesn't mean all walkers, all bikers, or just traffic. It's a mix. Up there you also see all the people in the area and the region that are using Complete Streets. Again, the 800 or 900 people that are using it. Some more local Complete Streets. And with that, if I can answer any questions on the ordinance itself, I want to thank all the different groups that were involved in this. That includes staff, that includes the Complete Streets Commission. It also includes some of the people that came to the Planning Commission to testify, which was Mr. Shannon as a citizen. And Mr. Maldry, I'm not sure that we are totally aligned on what Complete Streets is, but I have to tell you it was an absolute pleasure to disagree agreeably. And I believe we've got a much better product for you guys to consider. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Leland, you and I had a few conversations about this. If this is passed, it is still up, it's not a requirement, it's a suggestion to developers. Is that what I'm understanding?
The Complete Street policy is embedded, is an overall philosophy that says the city of Bellevue or any of these other cities have to consider complete streets in all their new construction and major projects. So that's a requirement. Even as the ordinance was written, there was plenty of option to, if you would consider that and say, no, it just doesn't make sense, it's too pricey. There's, I think in Mr. Rossini's property, there's a 69 kV power pole in the middle of the sidewalk. And it says, let's not move that sidewalk, let's not move the sidewalk, and let's not move the power pole. Engineering, Public Works may come back and say, let's just put the cement around the power pole. And that, under a Complete Streets anyway, might be totally possible. The requirement for developers, I would turn over to staff in terms of how they implement it, but that's buried into the actual ordinances of regulations of the city of Bellevue. And Chris, if you'd like to add to how that actually goes into effect.
Well, most of what we do is with residential streets, obviously. We do primarily those. And we do require, like in Falcon Point, the trail, although, and that adds on to 48th Street, which is not within the development. But we also require trails within the development. It's not taking out any traffic, or it's not prohibiting traffic. It's just another amenity for the residents of the area and for the city as a whole. And like was said earlier, people look at amenities such as trails when they're looking at a place to live. But it does say, you know, we're providing appropriate accommodation for motor vehicles, pedestrians, bicyclists. If something comes up where it's totally inappropriate, obviously that would come to council based on the recommendation of either myself or Mr. Roberts, and the council can waive that requirement.
So do you typically have developers that come in and they want to develop an area and they say, oh, this city is all about complete streets, so we are not developing in there? It's not a detriment to, it's an optional added enhancement. Am I correct on that?
Yes, we've never had somebody come into us and say, oh, we were going to develop here, but now we're not going to. And actually, I think the developers, residential developers especially, put in those amenities because they're a selling point. It's certainly not detrimental to the development to have trails.
So what I would draw your attention to is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Suchek, that there's no requirement that every sidewalk in every residential area be 10 foot wide. A sidewalk is a sidewalk, a trail is a trail, and they're much wider. What we find in the survey, this 2017 Community Transportation Preference Survey that's cited on the presentation, is every generation looks to have more amenities. There's a strong preference to walk. So developers are accommodating what they see their market is. And Complete Streets kind of trademarks that, as I've said, to make that happen. But there's absolutely no requirement that there be a 10-foot sidewalk in front of everybody's house. There is a desire among the people that are moving into the area and developers to have this sort of amenities in place through Complete Streets. The best example since we last met is Amazon, headquarters too. I think it's Crystal City area, up that way, if I've got that done right. The prime determination of Amazon and Facebook for their employees are these sort of amenities. Those people that want to work with Amazon and work with Yahoo and work with Facebook want sidewalks, and they want bike trails, and they want electric bikes. And if they're on the West Coast, probably they want electric scooters, which is its own nightmare that we're going to have to address in the Midwest in the next year or so. But let's not go there tonight.
So if I understand, by passing this ordinance, it creates an opportunity for developers to say, oh my gosh, we could do this and build a development with this type of thing to entice the Gen X's and the rest of that group to actually live in those subdivisions because those amenities are available. But to a developer, it's not a you have to do this or else. It's a suggestion.
Yeah, they have to take the minimum requirements that the city of Bellevue has in front of them and take their lumps in the marketplace if they have a development that is not attractive to people that want to move here.
Okay.
Sioux City, Des Moines, Denver, Boulder, Kansas City, Minneapolis, they're all Complete Streets. Those are our competitors. So if it's not a Facebook, which is 5,000 employees, if it's only 250 employees, the first thing an employer is going to do is do this sort of search on Complete Streets. And again, to back up to where we were in August, this is an amendment with a lot of help and support from all the people to modify what's in the books to ensure to the city council that you have proper oversight both on spending and both on the range of Complete Streets that are put in. And I believe that we've done that, and I thank again the people, including especially Mr. Maldry, for all his work and comments. Can I answer any other comments?
Mr. Prester? Yes. My congratulations and gratitude to you, Leland, for leading, being a good listener, understanding where some of the objections came from, and having a clear picture that you articulated tonight on what Complete Streets is. I would just add, in addition, the economic development aspect of it is very clear because people want the amenities in a city. They want quality of life. We also have elderly people, and they want to be able to walk safely to places. We have the Americans with Disability Act that requires us to have curb cuts and good, safe access for the elderly. Both and all of that, including getting our children safely to school, is a part of Complete Streets. There is nowhere in Complete Streets that says every street has to have a sidewalk, every street has to have a bicycle trail, every street has to have all of these amenities. What it says is We will plan for. It's good planning. That's what city code does. You look at it before the fact rather than after the fact. And then if it makes sense, if it's economically feasible, if it's good for the area, if it's the appropriate street to have a bicycle trail, if it makes the connection, as you said, we have a disjointed city. These trails and parks need connecting to create a whole and a homogeneous city. So it isn't about making streets unacceptable to traffic and to cars. That's the farthest thing from it. It's making it so that everybody can use the streets safely, and rather than as Bellevue is doing now, and we have to go back and put sidewalks in and create sidewalk districts after the fact, you plan for them in advance, you do it all at the same time, and it's cheaper. Complete Streets saves money, it draws in people, it provides safety and quality of life. It is misunderstood. If people understood and knew what it really did, there wouldn't be objections. But when people don't understand it and they just complain about it without a good, clear understanding, we get here. This revised amendment does absolutely nothing in my view. It puts 2 belts and 2 suspenders on. The council already has complete control over it as it was written. We can veto or not fund or not support any new development, any new street project. We could have done that before. This just adds that the council has to approve it, which we were already doing before. So that's the extra belt. It a second time says the council has to approve it, which is the suspenders. So I have no problem with this, but we spent a lot of planning commission time, a lot of your time, a lot of citizen time, and all that was already here. But now we say it and we say it again and we say it again.
So, Mr. Preister, what I'm understanding you to say is this just helps create forward thinking for the city of Bellevue.
Complete Streets does that.
Okay.
And it saves money because you do the planning in advance. You don't wait till after the fact, and then you got to go in and retrofit, and it costs you more money. Complete Streets saves money.
Okay. Thank you.
Great,
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
Another testify.
Where are we? Okay, so the third and final read, oops. Oh, sorry. Yeah, come on up. Sorry, I didn't close public hearings.
Thank you.
Yep.
Happy to do that. Fill in here. I'm John Perrin, 803 Jewel Circle, and I'm a member of the Citizens Complete Streets Advisory Panel. So I'm familiar with the ordinance, and as Mr. Preister just now pointed out, we're not asking to bring it in new. We're just refining what's been there for a while. And 2010, I believe it was originally put into to our codes. So I'm familiar with the ordinance, and I'd just like to say I like the ordinance. I even like the name of it, Complete Streets. I mean, think about that for just a moment.
Right.
If you're not building complete streets, then I guess you're building incomplete streets. So I just like it just for that reason alone, if nothing else. The ordinance as we have in the citizens' role in that is to just essentially prevent building incomplete streets. So it's not at all about bicycles. That's just one of the things. It's about complete streets, and it's about movement. It's about whatever means an individual chooses to get from one place to another, that the street public right-of-way can accommodate that in a safe, efficient manner. So, you know, that's really the hard part, is trying to guess what the future is. I mean, what is somebody actually really going to be doing? How are they going to travel in the future? Driverless cars, all day today, as I was listening to the radio, there was something about driverless cars. In the Phoenix area, there's a new commercial one where you hail a cab or something and can go in a driverless car. In a driverless car. I guess we need a plan for driverless cars on our streets. Bicycles, will be more, fewer? It was mentioned electric bikes are out there. They really do cause more people to ride bikes. So I think there will be more bikes being ridden. There's even a battery powered mobility chair that zips around without anybody, you know, like pushing the chair, not the kind that you see that runs on joysticks. I mean, you can Google those and they'll come up. There's electric scooters, transit, use of transit. I thought that was dead. Who rides a bus anymore? But really, as Mr. Jacobson was saying, it's actually coming back. So maybe not in our area, but all Complete Streets ordinance does is gives us the opportunity to be prepared for all of this stuff. So I think it was just mentioned actually that Complete Streets is a philosophy. It's a philosophy of awareness and the desire to maximize each individual's right to move about freely on sidewalks, on streets, on roads, on highways, and accommodate as many users as we need to. It's an advisory. The ordinance is advisory. The committee that I sat on is advisory. The council has always been in control of it. It's been here since 2010. I think it's had a great impact. It's a quiet one. And it's kind of like on the rails. It's doing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parent. Anybody else? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And that is the third reading will be January 14th. So we'll move on to B, 8B. Ordinance number 3922, rezoning Lot 1, Milts Addition from RS 72 to BGH for the purpose of a self-storage facility. Applicant is 2715 LLC. General location is West Chandler Road and Cedar Island Road.
Take up the other two also.
And we'll also take items 1 and B, or 1 and 2 under B as well. Small subdivision plat for Lot 1, Milts Addition. Number 2, conditional use permit for Lot 1, Milts Addition for the purpose of a self-storage facility. And Sabrina, could you read the title?
Ordinance number 3922. An ordinance to amend the official zoning map of the city of Bellevue, Nebraska, as provided for by Article 3 of Ordinance number 3619, by changing the zone classification of land located at or about West Chandler Road and Cedar Island Road, more particularly described in Section 1 of the ordinance, and to provide an effective date.
Thank you. I will open this up for public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against?
Hello, my name is Linda Sorensen, and I live at 8007 Sarpy Avenue, which is directly south of the water storage facility for Milts. I'm just going to read what I have written here. I have several things I'm really concerned about. Property values, I don't care what anybody says, it's going to affect my property value. I am directly south of where they want to put the water holding pond. It's going to drop the value of my home and my property. My husband and I own 3 lots there. Safety, we have people walk their dogs, children playing, know that there's very little traffic, and everyone watches for them. If this proposal goes through, then there will be more traffic from the people that do not live in the area looking for ways to get into the facility. And they weren't going to be watching for the kids and the dogs and the people that walk around. With the increased traffic, there's wear and tear on our streets, which also increases the cost to the people who live there, more taxes to repair them. You know, the thing of it is some of the streets are dead ends. So there, you have to pull into somebody's driveway to turn around already. So that's a very big concern for me. Security, is there going to be more than one type of security? I mean, is there cameras, is there patrols? What is it going to do? And the thing that everybody knows is many crimes happen at night. People jump, climb fences, cut locks. What type of assurances are there that the people that rent these units will not put dangerous chemicals or participate in dangerous activities there? Lights, when they cut down all those trees, the lights are going to be everywhere. We're not going to be a quiet little place anymore, and it's going to be hard for people to sleep because there's a lot of lights. Fences, I don't really care that there's going to be a 6 foot high wooden fence. If they want to climb a fence, they're going to climb a fence. And if you want to look at how people are climbing fence, look at they already climbed the USA border walls for Mexico to get into the United States. So what's going to hold people back from climbing the fence? And that increases people on our properties and increases danger to us because we don't know who they are and why are they even trying to climb a fence. So it's just extreme concern for me. The water holding pond for the rain runoff, when you consider how much rain falls and it follows the land, of course, and mine's just down from there, how much water am I supposed to have in my backyard? I mean, the pond is supposed to hold a ½ inch. How many times lately have we had a rain that is just a ½ inch? We don't. Is it going to run off into our yards? My question is how big is this pond going to be, the holding area? Because right now it shows it's about a block in size. So my question is, how deep is it going to have to be to hold that runoff from that 9 acres to hold just a ½ inch? How deep is it going to be? Is it going to be a hole or is it going to be a concrete lined pond? And how are they going to drain that pond so that there's not a bunch of stagnant water sitting there ready for mosquitoes to breed? And if it is to be drained, is it going to be pumped out and down the street storm system? Or is it going to be drained off into my lawn? You know, because just imagine when we get the really big rains that flood the streets, would it be coming into your backyard? Do you really want that? I don't. Last but not least, the wonderful country-like setting that we already have with the wildlife, the deer, the turkeys, the foxes, the woodchucks would all be destroyed for what? A storage unit facility. My question to you guys, that you sitting here, would you really want this type of facility in your neighborhood, in your backyard? Why would you approve it for our neighborhood? We live there. And my house is the one directly south of where they want to put the holding pond. Holding pond's here, my property's here. And you're expecting me to be okay with that? I think it's probably one of the worst things I've ever seen. And I really appreciate your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sorensen. Looks like there's several people that want to talk, so if we could just keep it to the 5 minutes, you did a good job of that, and try not to repeat, that would be great. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Charles Falk. I reside at 1625 South 109th Street. I am the owner of Milt's Mini Storage located at 2715 Chandler Road. We've been part of the community at that location for over 40 years. Pardon me. The location has residential houses to the north and to the west of our current property. We've had no complaints in 40 years from the neighbors. The site that we are requesting your approval on is approximately 8 acres. 5 of those acres have a limited use, which is to the east and to the south of our existing site. I don't know if there's a site map that's available or not, or if you're familiar with it, that's fine.
Can you pull that up, Sabrina, please?
It's page 10.
Okay, hopefully you can see where our existing location is, and the red area is the 8 acres that's in question. The part that goes from Chandler Road and parallel Cedar Island Road, I don't know the tax lots, I can't read them from here, but that section has been filled with asphalt, concrete, and rubble, and then dirt has been put on top of it. It used to be, for those who are not familiar with the area, it used to be a railroad line. The railroad sat down about 30 to 40 feet below the surrounding areas. It's been filled, as I mentioned, with 20 to 30 feet of fill and dirt put on top. It's a limited use. You cannot build anything on it because the soils and the engineer say that it's not stable enough. So there's no buildings that can go on that property, or at least that 5 acres of it. We checked with Public Works. We were curious about McCorkindale Street that comes from the west, and it was projected to go to the east, Cedar Island Road, and connect it. And we were told that an engineered street would not be put over that fill area. It's too unstable. So Public Works will not allow that street to be cut through. We're proposing to put outside parking on that area. We know that there's going to be settlement, and we're prepared for that if we need to patch or repair the parking lot as necessary. The parking areas for operational vehicles, trailers, campers, and boats, at least on that 5 acre section there. The balance of the site, the 3 acres to the west, is proposed to be conventional storage and climate controlled storage. That area is about 3 acres. The buildings would be similar in construction to what we currently have at our 2715 location. As one of the neighbors mentioned, there's going to be a 6-foot wood privacy fence set back 25 foot from the residential property line on the west and the south, and 15 foot on Cedar Island Road. All doors on the storage buildings will face inside or toward the interior of the property. The tallest building that we will have will be approximately 16 feet from the ground to the eave height. To give you a relation, a house in the area is usually 14 to 20 foot, and that's depending upon whether it's a ranch, split entry, et cetera, et cetera. Site lighting for the buildings will face the inside of the property, not out to the residential area. Open parking will have safety lighting on poles, the same as what currently exists in the residential neighborhood to the south and to the west. While we do have some neighbors that are in support of our project, we know not everyone's in favor, and some of the issues that the neighbors have mentioned at the Planning Commission and also through emails are the loss of deer and turkey in the area, the loss of the trees, crime and drugs will increase, traffic will become an issue, property values will fall, and some neighbors will be impacted by storm water from our development. I just want to touch on each of those just very briefly. Wildlife, we also love wildlife, but we're aware that if our proposed development or any other development occurs, wildlife is certainly going to move from the affected area. Trees, the existing volunteer trees would need to be removed in order for us to complete the development. Again, whether it's our proposed development or any other development, the removal of the trees are going to be required. We're proposing to plant over 100 trees of different species and over 100 bushes to mitigate the tree removal. Crime and drugs. As I mentioned at the start, we've been in this neighborhood for over 40 years. We have had minimal police activity at our site. We see no reason why the proposed addition would cause crime and drugs to suddenly be an issue. Our operation is very secure. We have site cameras, perimeter alarms, controlled access, and we have a manager who lives on site. Traffic. Neighbors are saying it's going to increase substantially in their neighborhood, according to them. We have no access through the residential area to the south or west of our property at all. Our current access is from Chandler Road, and our second proposed access would be off of Cedar Island Road to the east. No access through the neighborhood to the west or to the south. We are a low-impact neighbor. We don't generate or create a lot of traffic. Our hours of operation are from 6 to 9 p.m., 7 days a week. As I mentioned, we have controlled gate access at our Chandler Road entrance, and we're proposing the same for the Cedar Island Road. After our proposed addition, we would anticipate an additional 40 visits on average per day, spread out over a 12-hour day. Property values. Property values will fall, according to some of the neighbors. Many of the neighbors have lived in the neighborhood for 5, 10, 20 years or even longer. We looked up many of the home valuations in the neighborhood over the last 10 years. We noticed that all of them have increased in value. Home sales also have not been affected by our current operation. As I mentioned, that we've been there 40 years. Stormwater. We can understand the neighbors' concern to the south of our proposed development. We have an engineer here tonight who can answer hopefully any of your questions that you might have. I'm not knowledgeable enough to be able to answer those. Let me just say that we will not add any more water downstream after our completed development than what is occurring now prior to our proposed development. If you have any questions, myself or Scott would be happy to answer them at the end.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please stick around.
Well, I made a list of what I wanted to talk about, but I've since changed my mind. Back in 1999, my husband and I bought 2 lots. What are the lot numbers?
Say her name.
She did not.
4 and 5 in Bellevue, and we
Sorry, can I stop? Can you say your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Sandra Bolduc, B-U-L-D-U-C.
Thank you.
But back in 1999, we bought 2 lots with the hopes of putting a nice home in there with a basement. And when we got over, after the city of Bellevue allowed the Josephs to bury cement underneath those lots and then throw dirt in on top of it. I don't know if you're aware of that, but the city of Bellevue allowed that. And we weren't told, Mr. Joseph didn't tell us what was under there, so we, being honest people, we bought these 2 lots from him, and we put two homes in over there, but we couldn't even, we have to have crawl spaces because there's nothing but cement. The people to the left of us lost their home because they dug all that cement out of that earth and brought in new dirt, and it just cost them so much, they lost their home. It went into foreclosure. But those lots along there, and the reason Mr. Joseph is selling those other properties is because it's just chunked with cement and he can't sell it to anybody anymore. But my feelings are, I hope the city of Bellevue does not fail us again, because we do have a quiet neighborhood. We do have city in the front of the house, country in the back, where you do have the deer going through and the turkey and that, and it's quiet. It's so quiet that you can hear the train clear down at the end of Chandler Road, and we're clear up off 30th Street. But my feelings are, I probably don't know whether I should have talked about the chunks of cement, but Bellevue failed us. I mean, they failed us. We could not do with those lots what we wanted to do, and I just hope it doesn't happen again in this instance. So,
Thank you, Ms. Bolduc.
thank you.
My name is Peggy Helms. My address is 2722 Bonnie Street.
And I'm going to just read because that's all I can do. I'm here to try and convince you to not approve the rezoning of this area for the expansion of Milt's Mini Storage. This is far too great of an intrusion into this residential area for commercial enterprise of this size. If you can see how it goes juts down into, and there's a few properties, mine being one, that are directly affected. I'm at the corner. When I look outside, what I see now, I like. What I'm gonna see, I'm not gonna like. I feel certain that if the shoe was on the other foot, Mr. Falk would be objecting to this proposal as well if he resided here or if it was proposed for his neighborhood out near 109th and Pacific. Why does it seem perfectly fine for our modest middle-class neighborhood to be marred with a project of this size butting up against our yards? The idea of cutting down all the trees and wooded areas for the expansion of this storage facility and then paving over the entire property is absolutely sickening. I cannot imagine this to be an enhancement to our neighborhood. One of the results will have to be the entire acreage lit up all night long, similar to a strip mall shopping center. I know he said the lights would all be going in, but you're still gonna be able to see it, especially the people who are close to it. This wooded acreage provides shelter and passage for deer, wild turkeys, fox, owls, red-tailed hawk, and more. Mr. Falk made the statement that they would be good neighbors, but nothing can make up for the destruction of the area as it stands now when the plan is to asphalt over the whole acreage. Even the 25-foot barrier and the planned landscape will not make up for the loss of this peaceful natural habitat. I will probably be dead or in a nursing home by the time this landscape buffer does its job of hiding the stark coldness of storage units. Excuse me. No spit. As for the storm detention area, I can't imagine what that will look like or how it will work, but I don't believe there can be a guarantee that this will not have the potential for a water issue of some kind in the future. Think of not the whole area being paved over, and all it will take is one very heavy rainstorm, which we are seeing happen all over the United States. The runoff would be uncontrollable. You cannot make guarantees with Mother Nature, and all it takes is one freak storm to set the damage in motion to those who live downstream on Sarpy Avenue and Cedar Island Road. Then it's too late, and oops, or sorry about that, just doesn't cover it. Information that I received states that Bellevue follows the engineering rules of the Papio Missouri River NRD, and any new development has to capture the first half-inch of rain on their property. A half-inch of rain, I have seen many times 3 to 4 inches in one rainstorm in my rain gauge. What happens then? On the subject of our property values, I cannot see this storage facility enlargement to be an enhancement to the property values in this area, especially those properties that will be on the edge of the expansion. In fact, I believe it would have a detrimental domino effect on the area's property values, starting with those properties that touch the border, of which our house is one of those. From Chandler Road, you cannot see all the homes and areas that go to the south and to the west of Milt Storage. When entering our modest neighborhood from 30th and Chandler or 32nd and Chandler, you will find the homes of hardworking, lower to middle income families whose main investment and asset in their lives are their properties, our little piece of the pie. I understand this property is currently owned by Joseph's and could be sold and the area could be changed, but it is currently zoned residential, and I would much rather see family homes built or sold to someone who would like to own an in-town acreage and build a nice home on this piece of land, or better yet, zone it as a green space. I will close by asking the council to consider carefully the consequences to this entire area. I would encourage you to take a drive through the area so you can see for yourself what it looks like and what this would mean to our neighborhood. Drive on Bonnie Street, Sarpy Avenue, or Cedar Island Road, as well as the whole little area, that whole residential area. I would also like to know about the future meetings that the public is not invited to attend, and if that you'll be talking about this, and will those transcripts be available? And when is the final vote supposed to take place?
Thank you, Ms. Helm.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Martha DiDamo. I live at 8014 Cedar Island Road. The city of Bellevue has two maintenance facilities to the south of us. The traffic is horrendous because all the snowplows come through, the dump trucks, the city street cleaner, etc. I sit in my living room and I can see those things passing by, especially during when we have snow. My concern is he's mentioned that there will be they will have a drive out to Cedar Island Road. What's going to happen with all of our city trucks, etc., going up and down this road, and people who are using that to leave or go enter? It's difficult enough now with our trailers to take them onto our property. We have 2.5 acres. So what is it going to be like when you add more traffic to that? And the other issue we have is definitely with the pond. I don't want to see any more mosquitoes. The swallows go out, and yes, they eat all the bugs in the area, but the mosquitoes are another thing. I'm old enough that I don't want to have them. So I'll sign. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Donald. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Okay.
Hi, I'm Tammy Winther. I live at 2712 Green Avenue. I've been up here before to speak to you, and I was very emotional. I promised myself that I'd kind of keep it together tonight because it's really all about business. Mr. Sullivan mentioned earlier that Bellevue is a corporation. So I respect that, so I'll stick to business. First, though, I'd like to ask Sabrina if she received a letter from one of my neighbors. She said she emailed it to you. We hoped that it'd be passed around. Mary Cleveland at 2912 McCorkindale Avenue wanted her opinion to be considered as well.
Yeah.
You did. Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you.
And we read it.
That's even better, Mr. Priester. So to business. This is super simple. It's about preserving nature, conservation. Never really thought I was much of a conservationist until I moved into an area that was full of green space next to me. It's about cutting down hundreds of trees, and they're not volunteer trees like Mr. Falk mentioned. They're mature trees that line all the streets of our neighborhood, and including all the area that's outlined in red. It's turning our neighborhood into a parking lot, period. Big lights, big security fences, months of construction noise and mess and traffic. Increased outside traffic and therefore a potential for increased crime. A huge flooding concern and a stagnant mosquito breeding pond concern. That's big to us. Besides, zoning changes. We're RS 72 right now, single family residential, low density residential. Peggy mentioned the people with acreages. To change it to BGH, that means heavy general business. I don't know about you, but to me, there's a big stretch between low density residential and heavy general business. It's not what I bought into when I bought 2712 Green. Property values, Mr. Falk talked about the current growth and the growth up until now. Absolutely. My property values have increased in the 6.5 years I've been there because of the setting that I enjoy right now. That's not considering the differences in the area and in the zoning if Mr. Falk's proposition goes through. Tax increases, I'm certain. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Winther.
Hi, Mary Leroy. I live at 2919 Sandra Street. I'm at the catty corner end of where this development is. I'm at the 30th Street in Sandra. I'm down around the corner. But like my neighbors have expressed, when they look out their windows today, what they see is peaceful serenity. It's trees, it's green space. There's deer, there's turkey. The kids are playing in the street. We have a wonderful neighborhood. You gotta go to it to get to it. You don't just pass through it. When I look out my back window, I have beautiful green space. And it's always been a heartfelt concern of mine that one day I do hear that it's gonna be developed, that they're gonna put 30th Street through, and I'm gonna end up with a whole bunch of traffic and a whole bunch of people that, yeah, they're not there. I've been in my house 25 years, and I have to tell you that I come on behalf of my neighbors. If I woke up tomorrow and I ended up seeing what I guess will become a paved junkyard, I would really just not be able to move fast enough. So please take into consideration people who have lived there, our quality of life, and please vote no for this expansion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leroy.
How y'all doing? I'm Mike Kropp. I live at 8010 Cedar Island Road. I'm going to be directly below this retaining pond. I know Larry Joseph really well, and that guy said that he's never had any problems in the neighborhood for 40 years. That is not true. He's been feuding with Larry Joseph for years. I wish you guys, could you put that lot picture back up there for a second? There's a spot. Okay, right where the existing place is now, if you go just a little south, there's been a major ravine there for years from water running off just the 4 acres or whatever the concrete he's got now running off to the south. Him and Larry would fighting for years over this. I don't know if, apparently it's been taken care of because I walked up there the other day and it's full now, but if it could do that kind of damage, I can't imagine what 9 acres going straight south. I just can't imagine. You know, I've been in parking lots before, seen that much of rain. I mean, I don't know how big this retaining pond's going to be, but I just need to know who's going to be liable when that thing fails. Is it going to be the city of Bellevue, Milts? Who am I going to be suing? Do you guys have any response to that? I mean, I just need to know this because there's inevitably it's going to flood over. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Right now, it's like a sponge. It rains, the water goes in the ground. Oh, I just can't even imagine what it's going to be like after he gets all this concrete poured or asphalt or whatever he's going to do. So anyway, that's what I'm concerned about because my property's 30 feet below where this retaining pond is going to be. I'm going to be less than 100 feet away. And whatever you guys decide. I mean, I'm just one person, but I speak for me and all my neighbors. We all agree that this is idiotic. It's insane and whatever, but that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tracy Liebert. I live on 2702 Margot Street, which is north of Chandler. I did not get notice about this at all. Nobody notified us. I guess I'm over 301 feet. But I'm still directly affected. I have young children that are unable to walk to school. We don't have the proper sidewalks in our neighborhood for increased traffic. So I beg you guys, do not allow this to happen. So, because they can't even walk to school. I don't even trust myself walking them to school. I've lived in my home for 19 years. I didn't think about that when I first bought the home, about no sidewalks in the neighborhood to even walk to school. I deal with all the traffic whenever they do have an auction at the storage facility, it backs up into my street. I'm 1 block over. I'm on the other side. I guess I'm the only one talking from my side of the streets, I guess. But it does affect 1 block over the opposite direction. So I ask him, each one of you guys, take your young children and let them walk down Chandler and see how it's like. It's not good. Traffic is horrible right now. When they have Bellevue City cleanup, it's backed up all the way. 1 little accident right there on Chandler and Sarpy Avenue, Cedar Island, you can't go nowhere. You're stuck. You have to sit there and turn around. Backup neighborhood would be mine, turn around. Then you have to go clear to Harrison to get around to up to 25th Street, or go all the way up to 36th Street to get around to Cornhusker to come right back into the neighborhood again. There is no directions. There's no opening of streets. So I just take all that into consideration for you guys to take into consideration and look at all that. All right, I'm done. That's it.
Thank you,
My
Ms.
side.
Liebert.
I just put my address and name up here.
Yes, please.
Can I take my glasses off?
You can come forward.
Oh, and by the way, I was one of the kids that were moved from Chandler when you guys built the interstate. So I've been there for almost 40 years in that same area, and I watched all the developments. So I don't want to see another big development go in.
Name's Scott Hengler. I live at 7901 Cedar Island Road, directly across from what is going to be a big eyesore for me. We live uphill from his property over there, and I am very familiar with outside storage, and it ends up being a junkyard. I don't care what he tells you, will come in. My father was in this storage for years, and what pays stays. Doesn't matter what he says is going to come in, it's just going to be this, that, it's going to be junk. And I've got to look at it. For the rest of my life, we've been there for 16 years. We just purchased a place here a couple months ago. And looking this, I'm going to be nice, is not what I want to see. His driveway is going to be right in front of my driveway. So I'm going to have traffic constantly. He says, oh, it's 40 cars a day. I don't think so. I think it's just it doesn't belong in our neighborhood. I don't think any of my neighbors want it. I don't want it. We have 5 storage lots within walking distance of where we live. I don't think we need another one, especially when he owns one on the other side of Kennedy Freeway. That's huge. He's got them all over. I don't see why he can't go somewhere else, but it has to be in our neighborhood. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hengler.
My name's Todd Kelhoff, 8209 Cedar Island Road. My big concern is the traffic. Cedar Island Road is listed at 30 miles an hour. 25th Street is 25, so we get a lot of traffic. 2002, my father was struck and killed. 2 years ago, we had a motorcycle van accident. Burned up the van, killed the motorcycle driver. Again, when they say an additional 40 cars per day, if you've driven that area, I'm sure you have, turning off of Chandler into their entrance is a nightmare, you know, especially during rush hour or whatnot. So they're going to come through Cedar Island. No sidewalks. There's kids that walk Cedar Island every day. My daughter has almost been hit by a school bus, no less, in the mornings. We've talked to the police, I don't know how many times. They're great. If you see somebody that's, you know, speeding every day at 3 o'clock, they'll be there at 3:01. But you can't control that. I know Larry Joseph. I kind of feel like I'm, you know, betraying him a little bit, but safety comes first. And we've already had 2 deaths on this road. So if we increase traffic, there is that potential for more. Especially, like I said, they're not going to use the Chandler Road exit or entrance to this business once the Cedar Island one is in. Again, no sidewalks. It's just a bad deal. And also on the pond, I heard one gal mention mosquitoes. I build ponds and waterfalls for a living. There will be mosquitoes. There will be mosquitoes. So you can think of West Nile all you want or whatever, but that is a big nuisance. So that's all I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and ask the council for any comments.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like someone to address the detention pond. I know they said the engineer was here. I would like for you to explain what that would be, how they are built, and since we had a few people ask that question.
A flash drive to plug in here. My name is Scott Brown. I work with RW Engineering and Surveying, representing as the engineer for the project. Russell Falconer is the licensed professional engineer for the company. First off, on the detention basin, I will say that it will not hold water longer than 24 hours, as per City of Bellevue standards and specifications per the requirements for Public Works. Throughout the design process, we will work with Public Works and Planning very closely to determine the volume required, the location of the basin, and everything to do with the outfall and the amount of water allowed to leave the basin to be a net zero with what's existing, meaning what is leaving the site now will be not changed in proposed conditions. It'll be the exact same, if not less, after the basin is constructed and operational. I'll start by showing one project that we did for Catholic cemeteries. This kind of shows a shallow basin. It'll open. As you can see, the basin is here. The picture's a little far away. I apologize. I can zoom in a little. But this particular basin is 4 feet deep by probably 50 by 100 rectangular. It does not make a big indent in the earth. It does not stand out. It doesn't create a huge eyesore. It's planted with amended soils and specific vegetation that's very thirsty, meaning it drinks a lot of water. It takes a lot of that water out of the storage before it is allowed to infiltrate into the subsurface rock and into the drainage system underneath the basin.
May I ask a question? He's showing us a picture of green spaces all the way around, but where this place is going to be is not green all the way around.
Let's let him finish his presentation first, please. Thank you.
So this is just a closer picture of the side of that basin. You can see the inlet here from this inlet comes from all the paved areas around and all the surface drainage from the grass that winds up on the paved areas. It's captured within inlets and then discharged into this basin before it's allowed to enter the existing system. So that's just one example of what the basin could look like. This is another project. I'm just gonna play this one. This one's 90th and Gold Coast, just south of 370. This is just a short 30-second flyover video of a basin we put in at this particular project. If it will load. While it's loading, the basin will not have concrete lining. It will not have concrete around it. It will not look like a swimming pool. It will not detain water for longer than 24 hours. They are correct that the requirement is the first half-inch of rain per disturbed acre be detained within the basin. So you can see the basin right here. This is all runoff from this entire site, including the building and all the paved areas for this whole site. So again, it's a very small footprint. This one is 5 feet deep. It's smaller footprint wise, so it's ended up being a little bit deeper. But again, that's all the bigger it is. This one has different plantings in it that are taller. They're thirsty plants. They drink a lot of water. And that is a compliant basin based on the City of Bellevue's requirements, which is what we'd be putting in on site. What will be on the proposed site is a basin similar to this, obviously larger in scale due to the disturbed acreage of the site. I've calculated that it will need to treat and detain 16,000 cubic feet of water, and it will be approximately, grab my notes, 135 by 80, which is 10,500 square feet of space, and it'll be about approximately 10 feet deep. That is if we go with the option of treating all of the stormwater in one location, letting it all drain to the south, treating it in that one spot. There are other options that we'll work with planning through that allow you to capture small amounts of that detention as it comes down the hill, treat it separately and individually in smaller portions and smaller separate basins as it comes down the hill from the north to the south. And again, no matter what option you go with, it would have a net zero or a negative runoff difference from what's there today. I'd love to answer any questions.
You said that it's going to be 10 feet deep, the one that you're going to put on this property?
Correct. That's what I've designed.
And how much water will go into that?
Over 16,000 cubic feet.
Okay, so they get rain. You say it's gone within 24 hours. So if we get a heavy rain, then they could have almost 10 feet of water in there?
Correct. But it would be contained within the basin itself. If I can go back to, this is an excerpt from City of Omaha's Green Infrastructure Manual. That is public knowledge for anybody to look at. This kind of shows a cross section of what the basin would look like and the under drains that would be within the basin.
So what are you going to do to protect that area when all this water's in there to keep people from getting in it?
It would have the disturbed soils to install the basin would be compacted to the required specifications, which have been specified as such that they would not erode over time. And the intent is that all of the infiltrated water would be directed towards the under drain and then out through the outlet structure.
I don't know if that's the answer to your question. There will be a 6-foot fence around the entire site.
Oh, yes.
If that.
Okay.
Okay.
So nothing more specific just around that, like chain link fence going around it or anything?
It'll be a 6-foot solid wood fence around the entire site.
Jeff, do you have something to add?
Yeah, just a couple of other areas to look at. If you look at CVS and you look at the Quick Shop on Mission, they have the same kind of deal, but they have fences around it. So that would be a good thing for people to go look at to see what it actually looks like. And even if you were to drive out our driveway and you look off to the left as you're pulling out of the parking lot, you'll also see the same type of situation. We have a rain garden which collects the water and then distributes it out at a slow rate. So for anybody that wants to see what they look like, those are 3 examples in town you can take a look at. And I will clarify one thing too. The first half inch, that's for water quality. That's where all the pollutants are at that gets washed off the roads and stuff. And so you capture that first half inch to basically cleanse the water before it's released. The second portion of it is water quantity, which that's the part that collects the greater amounts of water, then releases it slowly. So just so people understand the difference between that half inch and a normal 2, 5, 10, 50, 100-year storm, those are 2 separate items.
And they would both be contained within the one basin, though, is the intention.
Any more questions? Mr. Preister?
Just could you address pond containment, it's not actually a pond, it's an engineered structure.
Correct.
And underneath, you've taken the clay soil out, which doesn't allow the percolation to go down and to filter. So you've engineered it. But even as it percolates slowly through and filters that water, once we get these big rains and we get more of the 3 and 4 and even 6-inch rains than we ever did. So the 100 and 200 year rains are now happening every 5 years or sooner.
Yep.
What happens when this pond is at its peak and then it may not breach, but it starts running over, and what happens downstream?
As per the City of Bellevue requirements, the pond will be designed to detain the 10-year difference from pre to post development, so that it being grass now runs off a lot less water than when it would be as proposed as concrete. Obviously, water will run off of concrete much quicker. So we would design everything per the City of Bellevue specifications. But as far as to in reality what happens when it overtops, it would overtop and it would roll down those hills. But there will be 25 feet of landscape plantings surrounding the whole site in that buffer zone that's required, also per planning as well.
So additional catch area with water absorbing plants 25 feet from outside of the fence going farther south.
Correct. In that 25-foot setback on that side of the property.
And 25 feet isn't even here to the back wall. That's not much comfort to those folks living down there.
I understand.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
Not to this gentleman, but I asked Captain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I asked, one of the concerns that the citizens had was regards to security and safety and crime and those types of things. So I asked Captain Stukenholtz to pull some crime statistics with regards to the other milts and that area with regards to storage areas. Can you comment on that, Captain?
Over the past 5 years, I researched the calls for service at Milt at 2715 Chandler Road West. The top call service was 12 burglaries that were reported there. Storage units were broken into with items stolen. 3 thefts, we had 2 alarm calls, and then 5 other calls for service, such as suspicious activity, check on a car that was suspicious in the area, and so forth. So it's not that we don't get calls for service there. It's not a big drain on our resources, but the burglary seems to be the main call to storage facilities like this.
And so if I understand, in 5 years, you've had 12 calls. Is that correct?
In 5 years, there were 12 burglaries reported.
Okay.
Now, keep in mind, there were probably others that occurred that were not reported because they didn't know what was taken, or the time that they found them may have been quite lengthy, but there were 12 reported to the police.
Okay, thank you.
I close the public hearing.
My name is Paul Bolduc.
We, go ahead, Lynn. You want to open it? Hold on, we got to determine if we want to open it, sir.
Well, I only got one question. How many other big ponds you got?
Let us open.
Let's just do a formality here. I'll make a motion, we open up for public hearing.
Second.
I'm
Motion
curious.
by Cook, hold on. Motion by Cook, second by Preister to open it up for public hearing. Please vote.
Sabrina, do you need a voice vote to make it easier?
Ready to go?
Not yet, hold on. Sorry.
Parliamentary rules are too complicated.
For some reason, it's not
Gonna
going,
open it up for
so
others now too, so.
we'll do that. So, Mr. Stinson?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Shannon?
Yes.
Mr. Preister?
Yes.
Mr. Burns?
Yes.
Ms. Welch?
Yes.
All voted yes.
There you go, thank
Well,
you.
I'm curious, how many other 8-acre cement with metal roofs and stuff like this, the ponds that you have around here collecting water? Is this gonna be a unique thing, or we got 25 or 30 of them around town I don't know about?
Mr. Roberts?
Because I've seen 4 inches of water run down my street. And I know Dwayne said when he lived next door to me where the Sorensens lived, that water ran down back of his house one night for a whole night.
Mr. Shuchuk, do you have an answer to that, or Mr. Roberts?
Yeah, we have these all over town. Another one that's close to where you are is on Chandler and 25th Street, the Kennedy, what's that, Kennedy Plaza?
Town Center.
Kennedy Town Center. There's one in there where they built the, where the car dealerships are in that area. There's one there. Every development,
Car
housing.
dealerships are a little different than houses, though.
Well, they still follow the same
I'm
rules.
kind of interested in residential areas more than I am industrial areas.
It's the same thing. It doesn't matter. You determine the runoff, and then based on the runoff that's existing, then you have to design it to, again, have a net zero runoff. So whether it's housing, car dealerships or anything, they all follow the same rules. They just have
Well,
to
I
go through a
imagine lot of
different
the
design
houses all
process.
have basements around me, and I, not so lucky, but a lot of them probably got basements. And if you had a lot of water run down through the backside there, like Dwayne said, went down through there with just what the cement's up there now, you might have some flooded basements.
Well, again, through the design process, those kind of things be taken care of and looked at.
Okay.
But to finish your question, any development, housing development even, they all have these. They're all in the new SIDs that go in. They all have these detention and with the slow release and all that stuff. So it's pretty common practice nowadays.
Okay. I've seen them in Florida. I've never seen them around here.
Yeah, we have them all
Don't
over the
make
place.
it
That's a
place
requirement we have.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Anybody else want the opportunity while we're here? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Any other comments? Oops, sorry. Ma'am, I'm sorry, I closed it, I'm sorry.
That's kind of like somebody shutting the bathroom door before they get
Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know if there's any other description or anything that's planned or any other speakers. If there are, I'd certainly defer to that. But I wanted to clarify a few things that I heard. One was Sandra Volvic said that the city allowed dumping of that concrete, and she's absolutely right. That was a huge area, and a lot of concrete was dumped there. I don't know that the city allowed it. I don't know if any permits were issued. It may just have happened. I don't know if anybody here knows anything about how that happened.
You had somebody in the audience.
If somebody does, if they would come up and, nobody from the city?
No, it's our property.
She's being requested. so
Right.
we're
Okay.
So-
If you would please explain and answer that process?
Right. It was okayed by Bellevue to fill it.
There was a permit
Right.
issued.
It was the Rock Island Railroad. And so when we purchased the property, the storage was already there adjacent to us and quiet, nice. Anyway, I want to first thank you people and also our neighbors for their concern. We all love deer and everything, and I understand. We purchased, and my name is Donna Joseph. I don't know, I'll put that down then. My husband and I purchased it, built our home in '69 on Cedar Island there. And we purchased the land probably about 30 years ago, and with the intention to develop it. It was our retirement type thing. We purchased lots also south with all of the neighbors that we sold it to, that there was fill in the back. And Bellevue okayed, I think, a 20 or 25 foot setback for the homes. And, but I'm not gonna go into that, but we told all of them at the time. That is a lie, Donna.
Excuse me.
If you could just.
Quiet, please.
If you would please stick
It's
to the
okay.
questions, because
Sure.
we had to
Anyway,
end the public
that's okay.
hearing. But you did have a permit then from the
We did.
city.
It was to fill the
for
Rock Island.
beneficial, what they call
Yes.
beneficial landfill.
Exactly.
Which would have been concrete or asphalt or gravel.
That's right.
And that's the extent of what was put in it?
Right, it was a deep cut. When the interstate was going in, we had that come in. And some of that type of thing, the concrete and all that. Yes, asphalt and such.
Okay.
And it was a deep cut, and so I thought possibly up front by Chandler that we could put maybe a little coffee shop or something up there. But as we find out, it's not good to put any footings or anything like that. Right. So this being, we thought, very nice and quiet and not really bad crime or anything that we really had problems with, it would be okay to develop that other part into storage. And they're very nice people and willing to work with all the neighbors and us. And that's about all I can say about it.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
Right.
You answered. About what
Okay.
year was that?
1985, so it was the 80s.
85
yes.
is when you were doing the filling.
It's been a long time since we had it filled and covered. And my husband maintained it, mowed it, and kept it up, and then he's kind of slowed down quite a bit.
Sure. Did
So-
you also do the fill under Chandler Road? I was amazed that the bridge, the trestle, the road never changed when that happened.
Right.
And somehow stuff got pushed under that trestle and filled over, and the road
correct.
is still there.
Yes.
So you did that?
Yes, that was the beginning of it right there. And then
Right.
across the low part, who belongs to somebody else. They never filled theirs or anything. It's lower.
Right.
The Sarpy Ave
Yeah.
or going down there.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much for
You
the
bet.
information.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I wanted to ask also, where is it? We were asked when this would be voted on, and the mayor will say that at the end, but this will carry over for 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks at the January meeting, first week in January, that's
Christmas, so it'll be January 14th to answer your question.
January 14th will be when the actual vote will take place. This is just a public hearing.
Right.
And the other part of it that Mrs. Helms, Peggy wondered about was any notices. And there aren't any other public meetings that I know of that there will be any notices on. This is the meeting. There may be some discussions, but those will just be individual discussions. Unless somebody else knows of anything, there won't be any other notice because there aren't any other meetings. We first have the Planning Commission meeting, which you were noticed on, and then the council meeting. And I think those were the only questions that I recall people asking.
I have a question for the developer.
Okay, Mr. Shannon has a question for the developer.
No.
Nope, sorry.
Charles
Sabrina,
Falk.
can you put the map back up? Maybe we don't need it, but it helps. As we look at the colored area, this is where you're going to be developing and building and doing
Correct.
all this, right?
Correct.
Okay. If we look at this and we're really jetting into the neighborhood there, if we cut that off straight and eliminated the southernmost portion of this, how would that impact your project?
I believe that's where the detention area is going, so that would shrink the size of the project. Because if the detention basin is gone, then that would have to move further north towards Chandler Road.
Well, I'm trying to figure out where the compromise is here to, meet the needs of a developer here who's trying to bring economic development to Bellevue and the needs of the homeowners who are trying to preserve their habitat. It's a heavily treed area. I'm just not sure that allowing commercial development to jet that far into a neighborhood is a good idea. I mean, where there's not other things already developed up higher, I'm a little better with that, but I think maybe we could do that. I also thought perhaps instead of putting all these lights on, maybe you could put them on motion sensors or something so that they're not gonna have that, prison yard look all night long kind of thing. So, maybe we could do some motion sensor lights or some other things, some accommodations to try to make this palatable for everybody.
Sure, and we're willing to do that with the motion lights. We talked about that amongst our management team.
Okay.
And the consensus was amongst our own team is that we would prefer, if we lived in the area or an area that had lights such as this, we would prefer that they were on all the time rather than they come on and off and on and off. If a squirrel runs, for example, or a raccoon or whatever runs through there, a piece of paper blows through there, the lights will turn on, stay on for a period of time, then go off, on and off. Our team just thought that was more of a nuisance than leaving them on, but we're certainly willing to do it on a motion time or a motion sensor.
Okay. And if we did not grant zoning on the southernmost portion of that, would you be open to selling it to the residents so that they could, compensate you and keep that as a nature preserve area or something?
Sure, possibly we would look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that might be one solution. I mean, if you have discussions with the neighbors or something.
Sure.
So, and then is there any way to work this project so that you keep the entrance and exit on Chandler?
I think we need to have two entrances or two exits, whatever you want to call them. Cedar Island Road, where we're proposing the entrance, is where McCorkindale would have come through if the city or if that fill hadn't been in that location. So that's where the road or our entrance is mirrored up with where McCorkindale would come out at. And the traffic or the customers that will come and go, it'll be, some people say, well, it's all going to stop off of Chandler Road. I'm not sure what assumption they're basing that on. We have other properties with multiple entrances, and that's not the case.
And that's not stable enough to put a roadway in, but you're going to put a roadway there and drive motorhomes on it?
It's a parking lot. It's different than an engineered road that McCorkindale would have to be to meet city standards. That won't suffice, but a parking lot, and we're aware that it's going to settle or move, and we may have to do some maintenance, maybe quite a bit, but we're prepared for that.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Falk?
Yes.
Thank you for coming back. This is a very large footprint in a residential area, I think is the message that we have heard both here and at the Planning Commission. The residential neighborhood is going to have a different makeup if this were to go in, including, and I thought that the detention catchment was going to be open space and green and the wildlife could still go through there. But if it's going to have a fence around it, it's going to look a little more industrial even at that point. So I'm concerned about the encroachment into the neighborhood, as Councilmember Shannon is saying also, and what discussions you may have had, and I know we got a list of a few neighbors who said that they have no problems with the development, but the majority of the neighbors that I've heard from are very concerned, and for the reasons you identified. A lot of it is that huge footprint. The lights are part of it. The wildlife not being able to get through is part of it. But just the total makeup of the neighborhood is suddenly changed. Can you mitigate that with planting the additional trees and the buffer? I mean, it's just such a big project. Have you looked at other locations to do this?
Well, I guess I'm not sure which question to start with first that you
I
asked.
apologize for throwing so many together.
You're fine. I guess to backtrack a little bit, as I mentioned, we've been at the current location for a number of years.
Right.
And we have residential to the north of us and to the west of us.
Right. But right now you're facing out on Chandler Road.
Correct.
And most everything is out along a corridor, but moving farther to the south and into the neighborhood and along Cedar Island Road is a big difference.
Okay,
to me and
Sure.
to the neighbors.
sure. Okay, if you want to add more trees, we're certainly willing to do that. As I mentioned, we have over 100 trees and over 100 bushes that we're replanting between the fence and our property line or the neighbor's property line. If more trees would suffice, then that's fine. We're willing to do that.
And you're willing to visit more with the neighbors between now and the next meeting and see what accommodation would be agreeable?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? All right, well, let's see, that was, find my spot again.
8B.
8B with 1 and 2, and that will advance for the third reading on January 14th of 2019, so. We'll move on to 8C, ordinance number 3923, amending Article 7, sign regulations of the Bellevue zoning ordinance regarding digital signs. And the applicant's City of Bellevue. And Sabrina, could you read that title?
Ordinance number 3923. An ordinance to amend Article 7, sign regulations, ordinance number 3619, Bellevue zoning ordinance relating to digital signs, to repeal such section as heretofore existing, to provide an effective date of the ordinance, and to provide for the publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so let's open the public hearing. Anybody here to speak on the sign ordinance? Seeing none?
No.
Nope, there is one, sorry.
Let me do the introduction on this one. This is Brittany True from Vital Signs. She's second generation in the sign business. She's hands-on. She builds them, she services them, she does everything with them. Brittany has been working with us on this sign ordinance. It first came up at planning in July, and we met at the Planning Commission that evening, worked with planning, made suggestions, and they took it back for improvement. It came back to planning in September. We again went to the Planning Commission, and Brittany showed up again, testified again. Planning decided they could take it back and try it a second time. We then met at planning again in November, and she testified again in November. We've provided some sample ordinances to them from associations that help cities write sign ordinances. And so we provided some templates and things to them. And all of this has been provided by Brittany. And wanted to thank you for coming once again and helping Bellevue with putting together our sign ordinance.
Welcome, Brittany.
Thank you.
Anything else to say?
I'm kind of humbled. It was very nice. I appreciate the opportunity, actually. It came out of left field to be able to help. But who'd have thought I've got to work on my public speaking skills, and it's really cool to see everyone work together in the cities. And I am second generation. I'm actually from Bellevue, grew up here. My dad we live right in the Milton neighborhood, so very familiar with it, and graduated from Bryan, and have been in the sign industry for 10 years and grew up in it. So I've seen the digital signs from the full spectrum. I'm hands-on. I help innovate the different different hardware we work with. I get to work on the client side. The permitting side, I get to work with Chris in the planning and all the different ordinances. We're not just Bellevue, but we're Omaha, Des Moines. I was in Kansas City today, actually. So I'm familiar with how there's so many different jurisdictions, so many different ordinances. And I'm excited to see that Bellevue is trying to better their ordinances and be more relatable, and probably ease some of whatever concerns the planning department. I know brightness is a huge issue. Every ordinance or every jurisdiction I work with, their number one complaint is brightness. So I'm thrilled and honored that Chris took my advice and input and adopted the industry standard with the foot candles. So it should help ease his burdens and concerns and have a direction that's able to go with for everyone to have a standard. My concern, or why being here today, is that there's a couple other things that I would kind of lean in a different direction. So really the main thing, there's probably 3 points, is the hold time for the 8 seconds and restriction on the static imagery. Still allowing for the scrolling text. We did find common ground there. And my other concern is the billboards changing to 8-second hold time. And I understand that digital signs aren't necessarily everybody's wheelhouse. They're kind of a, you know, they're there, but you don't pay a whole lot of attention to them, and that's all right. But I am familiar with them, and I try to find the common ground with our clients because they really don't know how to use them very well either. So the hardware over the years has improved with the brightness sensor. That's industry standard now. The odds of you buying one and not having that is very slim to none. So my thought is, with this 8-second hold time, I'm curious, what are we really trying to regulate? Is that really necessary? Because there's already signs within the community that now they're gonna be not abiding by. So what are we gonna, how does that coincide? During the planning meetings, I know one concern was safety, and I find that often that is the city's concern. It's a very understandable and respectable concern. With that, these signs aren't new to the industry. They've been around for 20, 30 years. The technology has just improved, so now we're seeing more of them. With them being around for so long, there's been studies on them. So there's statistical evidence to back safety, because it's not just Bellevue that's concerned with safety, it's everywhere. And what studies actually show is they prove that they are safe. So, and in that, in over 120 cities and over 4 states, through entities such as Virginia Tech, Texas A&M, and the Federal Highway Administration, they've found that never have been found to be hazardous or cause of an accident. There's been studies that were done to evaluate the distraction of drivers by monitoring your eyes. So there are these studies that you have these anonymous drivers that their task is to follow a route, and their eyes are being monitored. They're not known of what, they just know they're getting monitored. So the results of those studies is that the government declared a dangerous level of eye distraction to be 2 seconds in a 6-second period. So if your eyes are distracted for more than 2 seconds in a 6-second period as you're driving, then that is considered dangerous. So for example, texting is 4.6 seconds of distraction in a 6-second period. That is considered dangerous, as we all know. Digital signs, on the other hand, are at less than 1 second. So it's substantially, in comparison to texting, much lower, and it's also justifying that they're under the declared dangerous level. Another way to support that they're not dangerous is they're being implemented by government entities. You see them along the interstate. You see them in communities. Other communities, even city halls, have them. They're trying to get information out to the public. You use that with words. Bigger words, fewer words on your screen. So it's a way to, like Mr. Leland said earlier, with these new generations, the X and the Y and the Centennials and all that, things are changing and our communication is different now. And communities, you're competing with phones, you're competing with internet, you're competing with all these sorts of technologies, but your eyes your eyes is what everything is about. So when you're seeing even traffic signals now or construction sites, traffic safety, you're seeing digital signs being used to display information, and it's changing at speeds faster than 8 seconds because they have information that needs to be presented in a timely manner. Otherwise, that traffic's not going to see it. One person's going to see one thing and then they're gone. So I just don't think the 8 seconds is a realistic. I feel like it's just putting a number in there to put a number in there, that maybe we probably just don't need it. I've looked at other ordinances, like I've said, and I'm really fond of pavilions. So they're trying to address digital signs too. And if you don't mind, I'll just read a quick excerpt from it, or insert. They're trying to be accommodating, and like they say, except that video imagery and bright flashing imagery is prohibited. General animation and scrolling text is permitted for electronic identification or advertising signs and electronic information signs with a refresh rate of 0 seconds. So it's capturing that these aren't TVs, you don't want them to be TVs, but it's opening the ability to have realistic content be viewed in a safe manner. So it's a very generalized, implemental way of putting ordinances to back your request for being safe. You don't want it to be a movie. Digital sign owners don't want a video to play. So that's not the point, but you're at least having that in your ordinances that can be monitored and enforced. So in a gist, that's pretty much what I've got. I somehow have gotten nervous in the last little bit, but I'm very open to communicate.
The 8 seconds is all you're really concerned about?
The 8 seconds, yep. I just feel like that's unnecessary.
And the static.
And then the static. Scrolling, yes, but I think to adopt something that's more general and you can't play a movie or bright flashing imagery. Yeah, I agree. You shouldn't. I think that would cause more distraction than necessary. And video, I don't see, the business owner, it's not effective to do that anyway, but it would at least be a placeholder to be like, no, you can't stream a Husker football game, even though it sounds great to do so. That's not acceptable. The other thing is billboards. So billboards, the digital billboards, now you're opening up a whole other angle and doorway for outdoor advertisers. So there you have on-premise digital signage, and then you have your digital billboards, advertisers, Lamar. And it's industry standard that they're actually regulated for 10 seconds, so they sell their ad space in 10-second slots. I don't think changing it to 8 seconds, that might kind of create its own other deal, so leaving it at 10 is probably a
better idea.
Good angle to go with. And that was pretty much it.
Questions?
Any questions for Brittany?
Yeah, I do.
Mr. Shannon.
Brittany, a standard on and off sign for a business that flashes every second?
Like the static on off.
Yeah, where they flash on and off as you could drive by a business down the road.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like that would be a non-changeable. It's just an on-off switch of the light. So it doesn't sound like there would be much control of content for that because it's a static thing. But going on-off, that would probably be classified as a blinking illuminated
Right, but that would be a
sign.
digital sign under this ordinance. And it would never be able to comply with the 8 seconds.
There might be a little, I'm not sure, I'd have to check into the ordinance a little bit closer. There might be another stipulation that would regulate that type of sign, but I'm not too, because it'd be like neon. If you have open, that's a static. You can't change that. You're just changing the light on, off.
Right.
So I'm not sure how that would apply to digital. Digital to me is the LED screens that you have a computer that you can change content. You can change the words remotely. It's replacing a static reader board signs where you go and change the words manually with the Covers gas station have those, churches have them, it seems like. But this would be the LED screens that you can change words digitally.
And as far as the motion goes, you also have motion for when they're sweeping between, what do they call that, transitions?
Yeah, transitions, animations, that type of deal. It's just how you're changing your message from one to the next. You can do a sweep, you can do a fade, you can do a where it goes, just makes it less abrupt. Say you have a picture background with words on it. How do you get to the next picture with words on it is a transition.
Okay. And then one of the things that Leland said at the Planning Commission that I want to share with my fellow council members is, 8 seconds, a car's 300 feet down the road, okay, at 30 miles an hour, okay? So it's not enough to get a message across even if you put that kind of a restriction on a business, because their customer's now 300 feet away after they saw one screen.
Right. And I was even just thinking about it on my way back from Kansas City today, along the interstate. It's so clever now how you can communicate with drivers, all the clever ways of drive safely and buckle up. And it gets you thinking, actually. It's like, oh yeah. And you get to see statistics of how many, unfortunately, knock on wood, how many deaths there are. And it's a reminder, and technology allows us to do so much now. And so you're engaging with your traffic. You're able to direct. It's wayfinding now. There's so many doors that are open. It's kind of comparable to the complete streets, that you're forward thinking and adapting to people and the way of technology and how things are being done now. So that's my opinion.
Thank you.
Any other
Thank you,
questions?
Brilliant.
Ms. Welch?
Brittany, I'm not sure if this is a question for you or for Mr. Shuchek. Are you saying that there's like one standard for billboards and then there's another standard for pole signs, freestanding, and windows? Is that what I'm understanding?
So there's on-premise advertising and off-premise advertising, from my understanding. So on-premise is you're a restaurant and you have a digital sign out front because you want to advertise your meals, your specials, that type of deal. Your zoning dictates if you can have off-premise advertising or not. So on-premise is you can only advertise for your entity on site. Off-premise allows you to advertise for some other entity, business down the street. You get more, usually that business then sells that ad space for a dollar amount, and you're advertising off-site, and that has its own set of ordinances. Especially when I look in other jurisdictions too, it's kept different usually.
So are we looking, Chris, are we looking to do an ordinance that does billboards off-site and on-site?
Oh, I think we all can agree what a billboard is. We all know what a billboard is. We also have on-premise signs and off-premise signs. As Brittany said, an on-premise sign is one that relates to the business that's on that property. An off-premise sign is a sign that relates to a business on another property. The example, and it's not a business that I like to give, is the sign for Bellevue West that's out at 15th and Cornhusker. That is not on Bellevue West property, but it is a sign for Bellevue West, and it doesn't change to a sign for Burger King or anything else. It's a Bellevue West sign. That is an off-premise sign. So that's the difference between that and a billboard. Okay. There are currently some regulations regarding digital billboards. We really didn't have anything that would pertain to on or off-premise signs, digital signs in the ordinance. So what I looked at doing was trying to bring those together. So we had similar regulations all around. One of the things that currently says about animated signs that I've taken out, it says signs shall not change panels or messages within at least 15 seconds. We're looking at bringing that down to 8, which is, again, better for the businesses. It may not be what she thinks is the best. Remain static during its display period, other than a scrolling message. So you can have the words going across the message, but the background and other parts of the sign cannot be moving, flashing, anything like that. We did include the automatic sensor to dim the lights automatically. And then one of the things that you had questioned earlier, the city reserves the right to further regulate individual signs based on transportation safety. You asked who would determine that. I think if there was an issue, either Public Works as far as something with traffic or safety, which again is not a real common occurrence, obviously, but if there was some issue with the sign flashing that was distracting or some other reason that caused a transportation problem, we could do something about that. As far as having no regulation for the change of the signs, I think that would lead, unless there was specific in there, to a sign that can flash. And then how do you distinguish between, okay, this is a flashing sign, or it's a sign that just has no time between changing images? It's the same thing, really. So I think there needs to be some regulation there as far as how often a sign can change. I did not put in the ordinance or proposed ordinance anything about the transition. I know some of the cities, like I said, require an instantaneous transition. I don't care as far as I'm concerned. It can be the scroll, it can be the sweep, whatever. Again, that didn't have any. That wasn't a concern of mine. The other item that Mr. True talked about was, okay, so a sign gives you 1 point, how many seconds of distraction?
Less than 1.
Okay, less than 1, and 2 is too dangerous.
Yep.
Right?
It's considered dangerous.
Okay, but if you're changing that sign as you're going down the road, there's another sign there that is changed that you can look at. So I would argue that you're being distracted more often than just a single sign that's static. As you're driving down the road, the sign changes, you look. The sign changes again. So your cumulative, I would think, would be more than the 2 seconds that is safe.
So what is the problem we're trying to fix with the sign ordinance?
Well,
what's the complaints that exist today with these?
The initial proposal was to bring in some ordinances, some regulations regarding the on and off premise signs, which we didn't have before. We refer to them as animated signs, which are different than digital signs. So we took some of those regulations. We added the brightness measurements that had initially been in nits, which is something we don't need to get into. Changes to the industry standards to foot candles. Again, we were actually making the regulations more lenient, where it says right now 15 seconds, proposing to change that to 8 seconds as far as the change between the signs, the messages. If everybody's okay with flashing signs, fine. I don't think that's what we want in the city. But if that's it, take out the change and allow the flashing signs. That's obviously your decision.
So with this ordinance, I would assume that these are, of course, you know what happens when you assume, but they're going to, people that already have them, it's going to be grandfathered?
Well, actually, since right now there is no regulation and then the requirement for digital signs is 15 seconds, is becoming more liberal for them. Obviously, there are signs out there that are probably changing more often than that. You mentioned the open sign. Again, it's a flashing sign. It's as opposed to just saying open and being static open.
And then what department is involved in enforcement of this ordinance once it goes into place?
It would be the planning department, and if there's an issue where somebody has to go out and talk to a property owner or sign owner, code enforcement would do that initial contact.
Okay.
Mr. Preister.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, the real, and I think you said it too, but it's distracted driving that's the whole issue. And yes, there may be a certain standard, and yes, there may be studies. I don't know who funded those studies or why they were done, but I know the more signs, the more flashing, the more distraction is out there. And so I'm assuming the whole concept is to have less distraction and to get people focused on the road, which is where they're supposed to be driving and paying attention, so nobody runs into each other, we have fewer accidents, and we have a safer community. So you're already loosening the standards. You're moving in a direction of allowing from 15 to 8 seconds. We're already going where you're asking for. I don't see an issue. I don't see a problem. And you don't have to be grandfathered in to be less stringent. You would be grandfathered in if we were being more stringent. So,
I don't know where this 15-second rule came from. There isn't a sign in town that complies with that.
but
I
it's
mean-
already in code. So if it's already there, as I understand it, then
Where?
It's part of the, that table F.
I mean, we don't have a sign ordinance, so saying we have it
well,
is
we have
really
a sign
throwing me.
ordinance, but we don't have a complete one.
In the memo that was with the agenda, it shows items, table 7F and footnote C, signs shall not change panels or messages within at least 15 seconds. That's the current regulation.
Draft.
I'm sorry?
Is that a current draft or a current regulation?
That is the current regulation.
Right.
I thought we didn't have a sign regulation and you wrote one now because we needed to have one.
If you look at the beginning of that table, it refers to animated signs, and I'm adding digital to that as well.
So you're taking an animated sign rule.
Yes.
Okay. Now we're together. Okay.
Good.
Okay. So it never did apply to digital signs.
Yes, as I said at the beginning, there really weren't regulations for the digital signs
Right.
other than digital billboards.
No, I think what Mr. Shuchek was trying to do is get ahead of it because he's seeing it coming down the pipeline that there's more digital
But these
signs.
signs are changing rapidly and the industry is changing rapidly. And if we're trying to get ahead of this and the industry's changing and the signs are changing, I mean, until we have a problem, we don't have anything we need to regulate. I mean, if we want to control brightness for safety, I'm there. Okay, we can control brightness, but the changing of the signs, I mean, you have to balance the business's need to draw customers in to generate business in your community, okay, along with everything else, okay? And that's what these signs are doing, is that's what's generating customers for business.
I would agree with that. However, I think there's an issue, and I know one in my particular ward, that the people stand on their porch and there's a sign that's so bright they could read a book by it because it's flashing and doing some other things. So I think there needs to be some type of regulation on these things, and I think that's what Mr. Shuchek is
Okay.
recommending.
Well, what's the issue you're addressing there? Is it a brightness issue or the flashing issue?
I think with them it's both, is what they were telling me.
Okay. It's hard to regulate when we don't know what the problem is. And that's all I'm saying. But you can't restrict businesses like Valentino's right across the street here has spent $30,000 on a sign. And, you know, I don't find their sign distracting as I drive down the street. I don't read it half the time. You know? I mean, you can look at it or you can choose not to. I mean, but it's not so obnoxious that it's jumping in your face, you know, as you drive down the street.
But isn't that, Mr. Shuchek, what you're trying to get a hold of, is that we don't have the obnoxious ones that are jumping in your face and creating issues?
We don't want those, and I think this would help.
That's
prevent
what you're
those.
trying to create with this particular ordinance.
And I think Valentino's is just a scrolling message. Is that?
No, they've got a giant square area. They do sweeps. They scroll messages sometimes. Sometimes they roll. I mean, sometimes they flash them. I mean, They have all kinds of ways of doing it, but yeah, I don't know how you would categorize a sign. It's a digital sign, but sometimes they use it for scrolling. Sometimes they use it for an image. Sometimes they have a little guy flipping a pizza.
And that would go down into like an animation. So you have transitions from one slide to the next slide to the next slide. But say you have on one slide, you have a piece of pizza and you have a price, and then you have the word special or Friday special, pizza or something like that. So now you get into an animation or design element of making your pizza. Maybe you want your pizza to scroll from the bottom and go up, and your words come in this way. So that's why my perspective and opinion is I completely support adding an ordinance. I think there should be a regulation to it. It's just what's the most effective way in doing so. I think limiting to that certain seconds is not necessarily the best angle, but maybe more words. Flashing's not effective for a sign owner, and I would bet that the sign owner could be educated more that, hey, you're doing that, and it's not really the most effective way for you to do something. It's distracting more than attractive. So I think putting into your ordinances no obnoxious flashing and that type of deal, I think that is, anyone would support that. I would support that as being an industry professional. But
So whatever we provide, whatever we agree on right now, if we want to change it, we can change it, right? If a problem persists without having to grandfather somebody in.
Yes.
There's an awful lot of discussion on this for.
Well, the problem is 90% of the signs in town would not be in compliance with.
right. And I think you'd have some upset sign owners. And then what happens? Do you put in this ordinances and then nothing really happens?
So if we take out the 8 seconds.
And the static. If you take out those first two bullets on C.
And I would recommend putting in no flashing, no video imagery. That's cut and dry. And that's eliminating you can come to a business owner and say, hey, you have video on your screen and you can't have that. Versus I sat and watched your screen for 9 seconds and it was too long.
And then the other thing is under D, the first bullet, I would change that back to 10 seconds on the billboards, because that's the industry standard. Correct? Brittany?
And that perhaps we were not on the same page on that. If billboards and off-premise is different than if you want to do the 8 seconds and you have billboards your own, that's fine. I just know that billboards and like when you get into the Lamar big billboards, it's usually regulated. They sell 10-second ad spaces. It's easy. 60 seconds divided by 10 seconds is 6 advertisers, and you keep it static, and it just makes it simple for everybody. But that's just what I'm familiar with in the different ordinances I've dealt with.
Go ahead.
Yep. Mr. Sullivan.
And it might be just because it's getting late and I didn't get much sleep, but all I hear is 6, 8, 10, and the rest of the words are just kind of blurring together for me. And maybe people are more alert than I, but can you give some written responses to our planning department and why you think they should be one way or another, as opposed to just speaking? Because at least for me, it's hard to keep track of all these different issues. And our next meeting on this till January 14th. So if you could, even in the next 2 weeks, get them there, and then that way I think we can process it better. I honestly am just having a hard time processing it.
Yeah, and it's a lot of people, I've said that before, a lot of people don't know about them. And the initial planning meetings that was my angle is that there's the International Sign Association is in place to help cities develop their ordinances. So my perspective, I'm trying to help the city, not put in an ordinance that makes you look silly and it's unenforceable.
So if you could put that in writing and send it to our planning, and they can forward it to us.
And actually, planning has gotten quite a bit of information from
I've
her,
already forwarded
including the
it.
links to where all the industry standard signs for city, or ordinances for the cities are, you know, the templates. Basically, the association has already written the templates for the cities.
All right.
It's not that cut and dry, but there's a lot of resources available to reach out to.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes.
I was going to suggest something that Ms. Sullivan suggested. I think we maybe carry on with the rest of the public hearing if anybody else wants to speak, and anybody who's got anything they want, send it in to me, and I'll see what I can do as suggested changes to the ordinance for you before the next meeting.
Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on sign ordinances?
Brittany, thank you.
Right behind the pole. All right, I'll close the public hearing, and again, this ordinance number 3923 will be brought to a third reading on January 14th. Moving on to number 9, ordinances for introduction. First reading, there are none. Number 10, public hearing on matters other than ordinances, none. Number 11, resolutions, none. 12, current business. A, approving the renewal of the consulting services agreement between Lockton and the City of Bellevue for the Employee Wellness Program in the amount of $19,800.
I'm here to get you through these as fast as we can. If you want me to do a deep dive, I can do it till your ears bleed, but these are routine in nature. So
I think I
if you have
campaigned on
questions-
shortening the meetings, so how am I doing?
Off to a good start.
And just,
Do I
just to
get-
know,
do we get
Mayor Hike, that if
upward
I did get
feedback?
it changed, Janie did contact Lockton and did get the address updated, and it changed to have your name missing.
Thank you.
So, any questions?
Move to approve 12A.
Second.
I know how to
Any
do these.
questions? All right, motion by Shannon and seconded by Burns. Please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. 12B, approving the purchase of a station alerting system in the amount of $248,495.30 from Raycom Critical Communications.
Move to approve 12B.
Second.
Moved by Shannon to approve, seconded by Burns. Please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. 12C, approval to reduce remaining allocation of expiring 2016 CDBG subrecipient agreements with Project Houseworks and Buckley Construction.
Move to approve item 12C.
Second.
Motion by Burns, seconded by Shannon to approve. Please vote.
I just have a question. What does this mean?
The council had indicated to us before that we had some CDBG agreements that were kind of open-ended. So we started making them 1 year with one-year extension. These two were part of that, and they've reached their 1 year extension. And as far as I understand, they're okay with it. So that's,
Thank you.
yes.
Okay, please vote.
All voted yes.
Thank you. 12D, approval to purchase 13 Ford Police Utility Hybrid Vehicles, 2020 model year off the state bid from Anderson Ford Lincoln Mercury Mazda in Lincoln in the amount of $446,823.
I move to approve item 12D.
Second.
Moved by Burns, seconded by Shannon. Any questions? Mr. Shannon?
Mr. Moudry left us an analysis of the cost benefit of the hybrid vehicles and how long it would take to just recover the money, not even get ahead. And depending on the gas savings you're going to project on these vehicles, you would have to keep them 11 to 14 years just to break even and cover the cost of the hybrid.
I'd have to go back and look, but I thought that that was some of the savings was somewhere around 3,800 a vehicle, and that's at average mileage. The police do idle and put more mileage on there. We think it's gonna be somewhat more, plus we've got the auctioning off of the existing vehicles. We are replacing every vehicle, one for one. So we have some money coming back in with the replacements, with the salvage vehicles.
Okay, but that doesn't cover the additional cost of $6,000 per vehicle for the hybrid.
I think that there's a document in there that Mr. Modry might have done something, but there's something from the,
Rich?
granted the dealer.
Captain Darby's right behind you.
Here you go.
The Ford switch to the hybrids, if you want to get the gas motor, it's only $1,700 less. So the number to really look at is the $1,700.
Okay,
That makes
1,700
sense.
is a lot different. We were shown $59.95, I believe it was in the packet.
For the upgrade.
Yeah,
So
for,
at
2019, they Ford quit making, you can't even get the 2019s, and so you automatically have to buy the 2020s. And so they put that $6,000 with the hybrid. There's a lot of other stuff that's with it, of course. But if you want to still get with a gas motor, you can, but it's only $1,700 less. And so at that point, your gas mileage and the savings would surpass that, the $1,700.
Okay, and I lost my note on this, but there's some system in these cruisers now that the 2020s that are coming out, that you get this service for buying the vehicle for the first 2 years, but it's a pay service after that.
That's the Ford telematics program, and what
That's
that
it.
is basically it allows them through the modem that's in the car. All the cars now will have modems in them, so we don't need to buy a modem. And then you can access, the fleet managers can access that, and it'll basically, you get a warning light or an idiot light that comes on, you don't know what it is, they can automatically look through the modem. The car will send that to the computer, and then fleet can actually look at it and know right away what it is.
And after the 2 years, what does Rich have to project for costs on every vehicle that we get this system on?
Maybe I don't understand. The modem is, the telematics program is 2 years.
Yeah, I
If
know,
you want
but
to
the
keep
service-
the program, Ford hasn't released what the cost of that is if you still want to keep that part of it.
Okay, but it's only free the first 2 years, so know that you've got a hidden cost coming. And that's a per vehicle charge.
And we've had the fleet maintenance manager involved in this, looking at it, saying, can you maintain these? What do you think? And he was in agreement.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to point out that that's 2 years free, and then we're hooked in because we're using the system at that point. So we need to know what that cost is.
In 2 years, we'll have that budgeted.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. I've got my questions answered. I'm ready to vote.
Other questions? That was who?
12D.
Who made the motion?
Me.
And second? Mr. Burns, okay, sorry. Please vote.
No, because it's not going. All voted yes.
Okay, 12E, approval of the low responsible responsible bidder for the East Lift Station and Force Main project from Newverth Construction, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $1,617,392.90 and authorize the mayor to sign the contract.
I move to approve item 12E.
Second.
You guys just spent 1.6 million? Oh, okay.
Any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Preister?
Just one question. I don't see Epiphany here, but there, on these bids, there was an alternate, and we apparently chose not to do the alternate. They were a little over 100,000 or roughly that range, but what are we not getting?
No, we did take the alternate. The alternate was to do directional boring, which means they don't do open trench cutting. And so that actually reduced the price. Because in the past, it used to be directional drill was more expensive, but we included trenching and directional. Now these companies have been around long enough, they've bought their drilling equipment. So now it's become a lot cheaper. So we actually saved $100,000 on alternate 2, or around that.
And that option
Okay.
brought
Because-
it under the budgeted amount of
which is under the
1.7
budget
million.
amount, so, yeah,
Okay.
that's why
The
we took that one.
alternate is for the other system, which
Right.
saves the money.
And the alternate is less
That's why they're lower.
intrusive than what the open cut is.
Good. Good job. And to Epiphany, thanks.
Any other comments? Please vote.
All voted yes.
Item 13, the administration reports. Comments must be limited to items on the current reports. Do we need a?
Nope, nobody does anything, just move
All
on.
right. Public request to be heard.
Click on.
Hold on.
Oh, here it is.
Okay. Any member of the public addressing the council shall abide by council policy resolution number 35 regarding principles of conduct and decorum, which states any statements made during city council meetings by the mayor, members of the city council, city officials, and employees, or members of the general public shall not involve personal, impertinent, or slanderous attacks on individuals, regardless of whether the individual so attacked is an elected official, a city official, or employee, or a member of the general public, and City Code Section 2-68 regarding manner of addressing the council. Copies of the aforementioned rules are posted outside the council chambers. Speakers shall limit their presentations to 5 minutes. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Close the public speaking. Moving on to 15, we have a closed session.
Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Burns?
I move that the city council go into closed session at this time for protection of the public interest. The subject matter to be discussed in closed session shall be federal litigation update. The following individuals will be included in closed session. Along with the mayor and city council, the following are asked to participate: City Administrator Jim Risto, City Attorney Janie, Pat Sullivan, Molly Miller. Is Travis here? Oh, Travis. Perfect. Jacat, is that how you pronounce it? Jacat, that's what I said. And police and Captain Dave Stukenholtz and Captain Tim Melvin.
Need a second.
I'll second that.
Motion by Burns, second by Welch, to go into executive session.
Did they vote?
No.
Nope, please vote.
So now you say the time after it passes. You'll go into closed session. Restricted to federal litigation.
All voted yes.
The city council has voted to go into a closed session at this time. Subject matter to be discussed in closed session shall be federal litigation update. In addition to the mayor and city council, the following are asked to participate: City Attorney Patrick Sullivan, Timothy Buckley, Molly Miller, Travis Jacott, Janie Jennings, Police Chief Mark Albert, Captain Dave Stuckenholtz, and Captain Tim Melvin, and City Administrator Jim Risto.